Good evening and welcome to the April 16th school board meeting. This meeting is now in session. So this is interesting, everyone. We're doing this virtual, so please bear with us as we work through our first virtual meeting. We'd like to welcome all of you tonight. And we are going to start with reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, and we're hoping that a flag pops up on the screen for you. So we'll give it a few seconds to do that. And colleagues in ELT and Ms. Johnson, I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So we are now going to start our regular meeting. And we start with our announcements. And so as many of you know, we have had to revise our meeting and budget schedule due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're trying our first virtual meeting. This evening, we're going to hear the interim superintendent's revised proposed 2021 budget. We're also going to adopt a resolution that describes how we'll be performing our meetings virtually until further notice. It is very formal, so I will try to provide a summary of really what it's saying prior to the adoption of that. I did want to share with you some of the upcoming meetings we have. On April 21st, we will have virtual budget work session from 5 to 7 p.m. And that will be followed by a public hearing on the interim superintendent's revised proposed 2021 budget. We were hoping to do that virtually, but we do not yet, we have not yet worked through the virtual public attendance. So we will have 3 board members come into the boardroom for the public hearing, and we will be practicing social gathering limits. We strongly encourage members of the public to provide their comments electronically rather than in person, but if that is not something you're able to do, we will be able to have you come in person. We will ask you to sign up for a time slot, and there'll be social distancing practicing and someone here to monitor that for us. Submitting your comments electronically, you'll be able to do that through email or using the online form that'll be posted on our Sign Up to Speak webpage tomorrow. And you can also leave your comments in a voicemail by calling 703-228-6015. Those comments will be made part of public record. But please know that those comments will not be read. However, all school board members will be provided all of those comments prior to the commencement of our public hearing. And so our staff will be posting that on our website and tweeting that information out on how you'll be able to do that. Then on Thursday, April 23rd, we will hold a virtual board meeting at 7 p.m. where we will act on the school board's proposed 2021 budget. So as you can see, that's a very tight schedule. We will have the work session on Tuesday, and then on Thursday, we will be adopting our proposed budget. We will be acting on the school board's proposed budget. And then on May 5th, we'll have another work session. And on May 7th, we will adopt our proposed budget. And on May 5th, there will be a public hearing for the school board's proposed budget. And all of this can be found on our website. I did also want to provide you an update on citizen comment. While we are not accepting public comment tonight, we are finalizing plans to allow public participation in future meetings while also complying with the pandemic recommendations in place. Again, we'll work through some of those virtual public participation issues. And we're hoping to implement some type of phone line if we can't do the public virtual implementation, but we are looking to reinstate public comments board meetings that will be held virtually. Until the new plan is in place, we ask that you please send comments on meeting agenda items to school.board@apsva.us. We ask that you state in the subject line that your message is being submitted for the public record of the board meeting. And then you can also call the school board office again at 703-228-6015 and leave your comments in a voicemail that will be shared with the board. Any public comment provided by email or voicemail will be entered into the public record and will be subject to the requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. Finally, I did want to share with all of you that we will be reinstating open office hours.
As you may know, we temporarily had to suspend those due to our closure, but we plan to reinstate them virtually starting on Monday, April 27th. We're very excited about this. Board members will again start to rotate through that, and additional information about how to sign up will be posted on our website and shared on social media in the very near future. And we are going to hear the superintendent search update, but I wanted to, well, hold on a second. I'm looking at our agenda, guys. I'm sorry. It's a little bit different than when we are in the boardroom. So, okay, I'm sorry. I see what I did. I also need to provide all of you an update on our superintendent search process. I apologize, first of all, for not being able to do that at our last board meeting. I was very focused on the COVID-19 pandemic, and it just honestly slipped my mind. So I wanted to let everyone know that we did not slow down that process. We have continued with our review of applications and interview processes through the month of April. And we are finalizing that part of the process, and we'll be entering contract negotiations hopefully soon with the ability to announce our candidate or our new superintendent in one of our board meetings in May. So we're very excited about that process moving forward and having been able to continue that even under the pandemic conditions. And I want to thank my board colleagues for really doing everything they can to find those times to meet, to practice social distancing, and continuing that process. So we're hopefully in May, we'll be announcing a new superintendent as scheduled. And finally, I wanted to allow my board members this evening to make statements. We have been really focusing on getting our work done the last few weeks, and at our last board meeting, we were focused on getting through that board meeting in the height of the closure process. But we have now started to find, I believe, a new rhythm and flow, and it'd be great for you to hear from all of us this evening. So I'd like to open up the floor to my colleagues for statements. And I'm going to start this evening with Mr. Goldstein. Are there any comments or announcements or statements you would like to make this evening, Mr. Goldstein? Mr. Goldstein, you may be on mute. We cannot hear you.
Unmute. There we go. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, good. Sorry about that. Thank you for the opportunity. I just want to say thank you to everyone, all of our school staff, all of the central office staff, all of the parents and the students, everyone, for the way that they pivoted so quickly and completely to this new, the new reality here. I think it really shows a lot of dedication, skill, leadership, and creativity by everyone in adapting to this new normal. I know it's still, it gives a lot of us pause, and it's still uncomfortable in a lot of ways, but I think we've really started moving in a good direction, and the fact that we did so quickly is very impressive to me. So I do want to say thank you to everyone. I think everybody's got a lot to be proud of here in helping us to maintain a rhythm in our remote operations. So thank you. Back to you, Tanya.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. Dr. Cannonen, would you like to make remarks this evening?
Yes, sure. Thank you. So first, can I just say that Mr. Goldstein gets the award for the coolest background screen? Or that was really neat that you sort of created a classroom back there. I like that. Very impressive. I would echo what Mr. Goldstein already said, but let me start first by thanking you, Ms. Talento, our interim superintendent, Ms. O'Grady. You all have been working so hard. And on top of that, I know Ms. O'Grady, Ms. Talento, you've been going out and working on the food distribution. Our executive leadership team has been getting out and helping with the food as well. And just all the different ways everyone is coming together and pitching in. Just really want to thank you all for that. It's really important work. And then just want to acknowledge that as we've really gotten deeply into this quarantine, we're at the point where stress is, really happening. And especially, again, to our senior leadership, but to all of our teachers and staff, many of whom are also homeschooling while they're working or taking care of others. Really want to thank you all so much. This is a difficult time, and your work is very much appreciated. And I'll look forward to getting back to the normality of our the work we have ahead of us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cannon. And Ms. O'Grady.
Thanks, Chair Talento. I also just wanted to start with the thank yous. We are in an unprecedented time, and people are giving so much. I want to thank our teachers and our school administrators. We have seen you be creative. We have seen you share so much of your lives with us, and we know that you care so much about our students. And we've heard from families that they feel your care and concern for our students. So I want to definitely thank our teachers and school administrators. I also want to thank our central office staff. They are working around the clock to address so many different issues. During the pandemic, I've seen them out distributing food and working on all sorts of issues around the pandemic that are important to our community. And so I can tell you that each and every one of them cares so deeply for our students and are putting in so many hours, extra hours, to ensure that they are working as very hard to help support our APS family. And then I want to thank our families at home. As Dr. Cannon said, we know this is an incredibly stressful time, and you were learning right along with our students on how we are working to try to engage them in learning. We know that there is a lot of stress at home, and we appreciate you working with us and giving us your feedback. And I think one of the other folks I want to thank are our students for hanging in there. We know that you miss your fellow students, your teachers, and I think some of you may even say that you might miss being in school. So I want to thank you for working with us and continuing to engage. And I just want to also say that we're continuing to listen to your feedback as we work through these unprecedented times. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Grady. Ms. Van Doren?
Thank you and good evening. Reed definitely gets the award for the coolest background. Very cool, very cool. So I want to thank Dwayne Loomis, who has set all this up. It looks easy, and I've participated in a lot of Zoom meetings, and it is easy, but doing it this way and making sure that the public can participate and be with us is a whole different kettle of fish. And so I really appreciate his work as always, as well as Melanie's, Claudia's, and Julianne's, because they will be making sure that we're connected to everybody as we really fly through this budget process. And we want to make sure we're hearing everybody, and they will make sure that happens. I am certain of that. I also want to applaud everybody's work on the food distribution and Cynthia Johnson's recent establishment of a task force to unite all of our county schools and volunteer efforts. And the PTA's work has been really phenomenal, truly phenomenal. I want to really thank also our county colleagues who have, been working hand in hand with us. Our legislators and our governor. I raise that because I didn't realize until we were trying to work out our electronic meetings how much of our state code mandates how we can and cannot work. And our legislators will be getting back together in person, because there's no other way they can do it, next week to change their rules so that will then enable us to meet. And our governor has been operating within that construct, and it's been extremely difficult and very different. You may hear that it's happening differently in other states, and that's because their laws are different. So They've been listening to us. We've been corresponding with them and telling them what we need, and they've been very responsive. So just be aware that there are things that we're doing that we're mandated to do that make things a little bit more difficult than we'd like it to be. And the last thing I wanted to comment on was my empathy for families who are having the working learning environment in their house, and particularly with the sense that there's no end in sight. I have 3 college students who are finishing their spring semesters, 2 of whom are graduating virtually in 2020 after an immense amount of work for 4 years. One who's interviewing for graduate school, and my youngest who is in university, her first year in university. And they are virtually in classes. They are doing new content. They have to, and they're taking exams, and it is extremely difficult and stressful, on top of having me doing board work and my husband also working out of the house, a very small house. So just to let you know that as board members, we are living this as well, and we understand it, and we know it's really hard, and it chokes me up a little bit because it's stressful, and I wish I could know when the end was coming, but I don't. So we're here with you. We get the struggles, but boy, are we listening. We're trying to respond as quickly as we can. And I know that our staff, while they're working very, very hard and making the best plans they can, they're also listening. And I think you can see that we will continue to evolve this, because I personally think we're going to be in this for probably longer than we want to be. And so everybody's learning. So thank you. We understand what we're going through, and thank everybody for your, hopefully, I know it's hard, but your patience is greatly appreciated, and your comments and support are always welcome. And your teachers need to hear that you care about them as much as I know they care about you. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Van Doren. I really appreciate that. And I will just share that this is a good opportunity, after what you've shared, Ms. Van Doren, to acknowledge that we have received everyone's emails. And we want you to know that we're going to be trying to respond to those by the end of this week. I know that many of you have emailed us personally, and I know many of us have been responding, but I personally am behind on that. So please know that I have read them. I know that a lot of us have been very busy working through the logistics of virtual work, the search piece, preparing for a budget. There's just a lot happening. So please forgive us for the delay in responding, but please know we are reading those emails, and we are sharing feedback with our superintendent. When we meet weekly, myself with one board member every week, and we are discussing it. Their standing topics, our distance learning, our response to the pandemic, our food distribution. Please know that we are listening, and we are in dialogue with our superintendent and the ELT, who, as has been shared already, are working very hard to do what we can to support our families and students during this very difficult time. So I just want to thank all my colleagues. I share their sentiments, and I'm so grateful that we have the opportunity to have this meeting this evening and share that. And so I am going to do something that would have been normal during our board meeting. During announcements, I have an announcement. It turns out that this month is National Donate Life Month. It's April. And last year at this month, I was sharing with everyone that I was going to donate a kidney, and I did that. And I'm still alive, and I'm still healthy, and I'm still great. And so while everyone has some free time this year, I thought it would be a great reminder to get online and renew your license, get that real ID, and become an organ donor. It's the little heart on your license. And I wanted to read their theme this year because I thought that considering everything that we're going through, it was a reminder of how we really are an intertwined and intricate community, and we are in this together. We're going to survive this together, and we need to work together to get through it. So this year's theme for National Donate Life Month is Garden of Life. For National Donate Life Month 2020, Donate Life America was inspired by the springtime scene of a garden. A garden and the insects within it serve as symbols of hope, courage, and transformed life. Themes repeatedly found within the donation and transplantation journey. And I would agree with that. Hope, courage, and transformed life. And I thought that that was a great metaphor of what we are experiencing right now. We need hope to know that we'll come out on the other end and it's going to be okay. And that our kids are resilient, we're resilient, and we'll survive this. We need courage because when we face the next day not knowing what's coming, it is terrifying. And the anxiety of not knowing how this is all going to play out on the consequences requires courage. and it transforms your life. We will be the generation that survived the 2020 pandemic, and it will be in the history books. And everything that me and my colleagues are doing and how we're doing it is going to be in a file that someone will refer to in 100 years on how did they do that 100 years ago. And that is what you experience when you go through a transplantation journey and you save a life and you change a life. And so it talks about how the Donate Life Garden depicts an ecosystem of plants, insects, and other components working together to form an interconnected living system. Similarly, we each have the potential to nurture and enrich our communities through organ, eye, and tissue donation. So I just wanted to remind everyone that there's still something they can do online to get a heart onto their driver's license, to support each other during this crisis. I'm doing really well, and my sister's really healthy. She is a high-risk person during this pandemic, but she's taking care of herself. She is also a paraprofessional, so she is working from home, working with her students virtually, like many of our teachers, working with families and supporting them. And so it's been difficult for all of us, and I really want to just remind us that we're all in this together. We will come out of it on the other end. We're all working very hard to do the best that we can, and we are open to reassessing, improving, and making changes as we move through this together and learn through this journey of the virtual world, and looking forward to coming back to when we can give each other hugs and say hello in person. So with that, I'm going to move now through our meeting. We are going to hear the interim superintendent's announcements and updates. So I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Johnson. Ms. Johnson.
Good evening, Madam Chair, school board members. It is a pleasure really to see your faces even virtually, so I'm actually smiling at having a chance to see you all. I do want to thank my leadership team because, as you've already pointed out, so much of what has been taking place has really taken place because of that leadership. So I am truly grateful to the leadership team of APS, along with many other individuals in the county. But right now, I also want to say to all the students, hello, we miss you. You keep hearing that. It is so real. We keep thinking about you. And so we are all in this together, and we will get through it together. But please know that you're in our hearts and on our mind as we go through. And to the entire staff, hello, I hope you're safe and well. And thank you 20 million times over for all that you're doing. I hope our families are doing well as well. So I'm going to move right into the superintendent's updates. And as I have pointed out earlier, it is a shared responsibility in terms of the work that gets done. The first two slides I'd actually like to have our emergency manager, Zachary Pope, give a little bit of an update on it, pertaining to coronavirus. Zach. If I could have the slides up.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Interim Superintendent Johnson and the board for the time to talk tonight. I want to specifically talk about our grab-and-go meals and the Cooperative for a Hunger-Free Arlington to begin with, but I want to continue to echo the sentiment that it's just amazing to see the dedication to our students and our families. Day in and day out, folks like school and community relations continue to meet and coordinate messages and coordinate those things that go out with the county to facilities, and how they continue to support the logistics of all the things that we need done, and everyone else that I won't have time to mention. Thank you for the work that you continue to do. It really shows day in and day out how much we all really care about our students and our families. So to continue to talk about one of our most essential services right now, and that is our meal service, specifically the grab-and-go meals at our 7 sites. We continue to be committed to ensuring that our families have access to food and other resources at this time, and we continue to evaluate those needs on a daily basis and adjust as we see the need to do so. As folks may be aware, on Monday of this week, on April 13th, we expanded from an original 5 sites to 7 locations, which included the opening of distribution from Key Elementary and Hoffman Boston. And just to remind folks, meals are being served at all 7 of those locations, regardless of which school you go to. If you, whichever one is closest to you at that time, please stop by and get your grab and go meal from 11 to 1 Monday through Friday. Just come to whichever one is most convenient. So some things that folks should be aware of. To date, we've served almost 74,000 meals as of yesterday, which when we look at our calculations, that's about 18,000 students that have been impacted by the grab and go meal service, which is a testament to food service and the ability for them to switch on a dime and really provide that need. Just some other reminders, families are now able to pick up those meals without the student being present by providing the name, student ID number, and school for each of those students through that email, which is food.services@apsva.us, or by phone to the food services line that we've published. We're continuing to evaluate plans on food distribution through the remainder of the year that is currently published. We're looking at how that impacts based on state guidance, the guidance from the USDA, and once we have some more definitive guidance on what that looks like, we'll communicate that, but we will continue daily service until we otherwise communicate. One of the biggest things I want to also thank as part of this grab and go meal service is our community partners, those nonprofit organizations, the parent teacher associations and businesses who are helping support our families in other ways through their own meal distribution or grocery drives, food drives. All of those items are listed on our website specific to coronavirus and available under the tab meal services. So if folks are wanting to access those services more tactilely, we'll be able to see all of that information, and we do update that as we get information. So next slide. The next piece I just want to touch on, as it was mentioned earlier, Interim Superintendent Johnson and County Manager Mark Schwartz met and decided that there was a need to be even more integrated, and identified that need and developed the Cooperative for a Hunger-Free Arlington, which is really being led by a group of 3 folks, one being Diane Kresh for the libraries, Amy McCloskey, our food services director, and Abby Raphael, she's a 2-term former school board member. These folks are working day in and day out to make sure that all of the safety net nonprofits are knit together along with what we're able to provide, really focusing on making sure that everyone gets the services that they're able to access, and really making sure that those most vulnerable neighbors get through this pandemic, and look forward to a stronger collaboration amongst all members of our community moving forward as we come out of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zach. I would like to move right into the next slide. And with that, I'd like to introduce our Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, Bridget Loft.
Thanks, Cynthia. I appreciate the opportunity to share information about our continuous learning plans. And so I'll direct our attention to the next slide on the PowerPoint, and share that last week on April 9th, we released our continuous learning plans for our elementary and secondary students. And those plans are based on guidance from the Virginia Department of Education. They're also based on our commitment within our strategic plan to equity of access to educational opportunities and to student success and well-being. And we'll talk more about some of the components of that plan throughout these announcements. I want to say that we spent a great deal of time on the development of these plans, and that teachers and administrators, parents really had some opportunity to give feedback. It really was a collaborative process also amongst our DTL, our Department of Teaching and Learning, instructional supervisors and specialists, and our DTL directors. And I want to give a particular shout out to those 3 folks, the categories of folks, because they worked very hard to put their professional expertise in and include the feedback that we received from staff, our teachers, our students, and advisory groups. So we had a lot of great input in developing these plans. We really value the feedback that we've received from parents and students and staff, and we do take that into consideration as we implement these plans. As is our practice, we also work to keep our community informed about the rationale for the continuous learning plans and how they're being implemented by teachers. So Ms. Johnson's message to the community yesterday shared a broad description of the plans, and we dove deeper today into the rationale for the plans and into answering many of the questions that have been posed to the Engage with APS page on the APS website. We did that via a podcast, and the link for that podcast was shared through School Talk today with the community, and it's also posted on the APS webpage. So I invite folks to take about 45 minutes to listen to that podcast. Because it will give, I think, a lot of answers to some of the questions that have been posed. In the podcast, Ms. Johnson, Erin Gregory, our Chief Officer for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, an elementary and a secondary teacher, and I speak to the key issues such as our dual commitments to educational excellence and the equity of access, and how do we do that. This plan shares a whole lot of similarities with the plans of surrounding districts. And some of those similarities include the connections that teachers are making with families and with students, the digital learning resources that are available, the paper packets for our pre-K through second graders, support for our special education students and our English language learners, mental health supports, and supportive grading practices. And so I'd like to go a bit more deeply into the continuous learning plans with the next slide. So, I really want to echo the acknowledgement that's been shared by our school board members and by Ms. Johnson that our teachers are really outstanding and they're doing incredible work on a daily basis to meet the needs of our students. The lessons that we're providing are new for our students, and they're building on concepts that were introduced but not fully explored in the first 3 quarters. We are not introducing new content that would have been introduced in the 4th quarter, and that's in alignment with the Virginia Learns Anywhere guidance document that comes from the Department of Education, and it's in alignment with our, as I've said, our commitment to equity in our strategic plan. I want to use share some language from the Virginia Learns Anywhere guidance document to underscore the rationale for that decision. And it says that care should be taken not to exacerbate existing gaps in student achievement throughout this period of school closure. It's critically important that all educators are mindful of the needs of vulnerable students, including our early learners, our English learners, our students experiencing homelessness, students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and students with disabilities. And I'm underscoring that because the concern for introducing the concepts that may have been presented in 4th quarter really led, the concerns about doing that led to concerns about broadening our already existing achievement gaps. So instead, we are providing new learning activities that extend students' understanding of topics addressed in the first 3 quarters of the year. And the use of new learning activities is really a continuation of best practices. Our teachers do that all the time. They often use a variety of modalities, for example, writing assignments, role play, analysis of text, and they do that to introduce and reinforce key concepts. So these new learning activities that teachers will be introducing and students will be experiencing use the key standards from the first 3 quarters to infuse depth and complexity into students' learning and to enrich and extend previously introduced concepts. We believe and we expect that these new activities will benefit students because they'll have the opportunity to really solidify foundational knowledge and apply their understanding to new contexts. Students in grades 3 through 12 are accessing this learning through Canvas, Seesaw, and Google Classrooms on their APS devices. And our pre-K through second grade students are receiving monthly paper instructional packets that incorporate instructions and activities and resources. Our teachers are regularly engaging in person with their students via phone or online platforms. Our students are accessing videos created by their teachers. They're also accessing learning activities presented through AETV, through the WETA public TV station, and via a variety of learning resources that are posted on the APS webpage. Our special education and our English learner students are receiving accommodations, additional resources, and direct support from their case carriers and their teachers. And our counselors and our social workers and our psychologists are working directly with students that they have worked with before school closed. And our counselors are sharing social emotional lessons via videos posted on AETV. I've let our teachers know that we don't have an expectation that this will be perfect or that it will match the experience our students had in the classroom. It really can't do that, but it's designed to engage our students, to keep the learning going in an equitable way for all, and to support each child's academic, social, emotional needs in these challenging circumstances. Can we see the next slide, please? So we're currently exploring creative ways to celebrate the class of 2020. And these students have worked really hard and have been looking forward to this moment for years. So we want to make sure that we honor and celebrate their monumental achievements. Once a final plan has been reached, we'll share that with students and families. We know that families and students want an in-person celebration of some kind, and we want the same for our students. We're committed to doing this and we're exploring opportunities, but given the uncertainty of the pandemic, we're also developing alternative plans that we ensure that these students are celebrated properly. So more information is to come on that. As far as grading, we are following the Department of Education guidance to not grade students' work during the fourth quarter. We can't ensure that all of our students will be able to access the learning management systems via the internet, and so we can't equitably assign a grade for the work that is completed for fourth quarter. We've moved to a 3 marking period model. So students' final grades for the year are composed of the average of their first, second, and third quarter grades. Final grades for secondary coursework will not be, final exams, for secondary coursework will not be included in the final grade. But our students will have the opportunity to improve upon their final grades during the closure period. They'll be working directly with their teachers to identify performance tasks that help, for example, students who have D's and E's. Those performance tasks would help demonstrate that students have proficiency on key concepts and would allow those students to move their grades from an E to a D or a D to a C. Our students with A's, B's, and C's will work with their teachers in identifying enrichment and extension activities that will help them demonstrate advanced skills such as analysis and application. And they will have the opportunity in working with these activities to move their grades from a C to a B or a B to an A. Our students who earned an A for their work have demonstrated mastery, and so they'll continue to engage in these enrichment activities to continue to extend their learning. The May 2020 IB exams have been canceled. Students will still have to complete the required assessments associated with the IB program. And the students will take their AP tests online in place of the traditional face-to-face test. The College Board has released its test schedule, and that too is available online. As far as SOL tests are concerned, they have been canceled for the year. The Department of Education applied for a waiver from the U.S. Department of Education. And we expect and believe that not having to take SOLs this year really takes the pressure off of our students and allows them to focus on instruction and essential skills during the closure. And with that, I'm going to pass the baton back to Ms. Johnson.
So thank you very much, Anna. To continue, I want to have the next slide, please, where we talk about school options and transfer updates. And what we see here is the VPI and CPP program. The deadline for these 2 programs has been changed to June the 1st at 4 p.m. And this is to allow families additional times to upload the documents that are required to apply to these programs. And this is all as a result of the school closure. Families are going to be notified by email or by text to accept or decline the slots that are going to be made available, and this will be occurring on June the 15th. Elementary option schools and primary Montessori, the application for elementary option schools and primary Montessori's closed on April the 15th. The lottery for these programs will be held online April the 23rd, and the link to view it will be shared with the families a few days before the lottery. Families are going to be notified by email or by text to accept or decline the slots for the program on May the 1st. Next slide, please. Aquí tienen la misma información en español acerca de VPI y CPP y también las escuelas primarias opcional y programa de Montessori. Quería presentar esta información en español para que noten que hemos extendido la fecha límite para VPI y CPP hasta el 1 de junio a las 4. So pienso que esta información es importante para muchas familias. Next slide, please. I would like to thank families for their patience while we developed a way to register students online due to all of the school buildings being closed for COVID-19. Yesterday, we launched the new conditional online registration process that allows families to register students for the current 2019-20 school year. Families are now able to securely upload their registration documents online and to send them to APS staff. We will soon notify families of the date when we will begin to register students for the 2020-21 school year, because we wanted to make sure we prioritize students who need to register for the current year first, so that they do not miss out on any additional instructional time. I would like to remind families to never send registration documents through email for privacy and information security reasons. You should only use the secure upload website to submit these documents. In addition, we're working on an option where families that do not have access to computers and or the internet will be able to drop off these documents in person to register students. We will, of course, do this in accordance with the COVID-19 rules. Next slide, please, that I'm going to turn over to our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, Dan Redding.
All right, thank you, Cynthia. We are currently working on 2 principal searches. We have 2 vacancies coming up, one with the retirement of Dr. Greg Robertson from Washington Liberty High School. We are searching for a new principal currently, and for the new neighborhood elementary school that has been created as part of the elementary planning process, which will be sited at the site of Key Immersion Elementary School. And that will open in August of 2021. Both positions are currently advertised, and we have an Engage page posted with the video that explains the process and timeline for searches for each school, and also the timeline itself is posted. We also have surveys to get community input on the characteristics desired and the strengths and challenges of the school posted for community feedback. That survey is open now and will be open through April 26th. Our goal is to bring the superintendent's recommendations for these 2 principal positions to the school board in May. Both interview processes will include stakeholder input. For Washington Liberty, we will work with the PTA to identify family members who will be part of that interview panel, and we're working with the student government to identify students who will be part of that interview panel. Students also received an announcement when they logged into Canvas on Tuesday that informed them about the process and pointed them to the Engage page, the informational video, and provided a link to a student survey so that they can provide input on what they are looking for in their next principal. So we are looking toward July 1 effective date for both of these new principals. The principal for the new neighborhood elementary school will use that time to start the planning process for the development of that school's culture and climate. As we move into the boundary process in the fall of 2020, that will set the boundaries for that school. The new principal will also work with the PTAs that will be affected by that to help develop the beginnings of what will turn into that PTA, which is similar to what happened when we opened Discovery Elementary School. We will continue to update that Engage webpage so that the community can stay informed as we move through the process. Thanks, Cynthia.
Thank you very much. Our next slide, please. So Celebration of Excellence, we are excited to announce outstanding staff members on Monday, April the 20th. We're going to kick off our annual Celebration of Excellence. On Monday, we will announce Arlington Public Schools Principal of the Year, Teacher of the Year, Teacher of the Year winners for each school community, and 8 Support Employees of the Year winners representing outstanding staff for each of our scales. All representatives, all of these individuals represent the very best of our school community and were nominated by their peers, supervisor, or community members and teachers within the school system. So we want to celebrate them. We normally celebrate our winners at an annual celebration of excellence in May. Since we cannot do that this year, we're going to honor them virtually, and we're going to do this through videos, images, and other types of recognitions online, and that'll begin next Tuesday through the month of May. We will be announcing and highlighting them on our website and social media. Additionally, we're looking forward to celebrating teachers for all that they are doing. And we're going to do this during Teacher Appreciation Week, which is taking place on May the 4th through the 8th. And we're going to use hashtag #ThankAPSTeachers. They are doing a lot at this time, and we want to be able to engage our students during this difficult time. And so we look forward to celebrating and honoring our teachers. Next slide, please. I will continue to highlight the many bright spots and examples that show care and support of our students and our school community while we are closed. Times like these remind me of just how wonderful the staff is and the teachers, and how truly committed we are to our learners. I have been impressed with the many ways that families and staff have come together, and the creative ways in which I've seen that families are supporting each other virtually, and to make learning fun, and to also lift the spirits of our students. So what you see here are some visuals. One is for the 4th consecutive year, Arlington Public School has been honored for the Best Communities for Music Program designation from NAMM Foundation for its outstanding commitment to music education. The Best Communities for Music Education designation is awarded to districts that demonstrate outstanding achievement in an effort to provide music access and education to all students. At Kenmore, you see our Latino parent volunteers stepping up at the front line to help APS distribute free grab-and-go meals to our family. McKinley's PTA shared a video highlighting photos sent by McKinley families, just showing a lot of fun activities during the closure. At Discovery, you see here our principal, Erin Russo, and AP Judy Sieber, along with the ITC Kevin Reeve. And what they're doing is broadcasting their weekly town hall meeting with families. And then you see Chip Bonner, administrator of New Direction, who has meetings daily with students online, checking that they're safe and that they can have access to food and resource. He also shares a positive message each day with students and staff. Next slide. And the last image is the Barrett Elementary staff dance video, which I think many people have seen, and it did go viral on Twitter, and it even got retweeted by Elton John himself. Next slide. I have some updates on the work in operational planning and the policy process for this year's school board action. Next. So here is the revised schedule for our work for the fiscal year 2021 budget. Tonight, I will present the superintendent's revised proposed budget, and then the school board has 2 work sessions and 2 public hearings on the budget over the next few weeks. After the 2 work sessions and the 2 public hearings on April the 21st and May the 5th, the board is scheduled to take action on the fiscal year 2021 budget on May the 7th. Next. We have a new process to obtain community input on the school board policy revisions and amendments under consideration, and it makes use of the APS Engage website as a central place to share draft policies and seek community input on various policies that are being reviewed at this time. In this process, after we complete the internal stakeholder policy process, we are now posting policy drafts and community input forms to the Engage Policy Review page. Interested stakeholders will have 30 days to share their input on 1 or more policies that are under consideration and throughout the comment period. They can provide any suggestions related to the policy that they want to share with staff. While staff reviews all suggestions, I do want to note that it will not be possible to reply individually to all who submit their ideas during the public comment period. We've made this change to streamline our policy review process and make things quicker, easier, and more equitable to all community members so that they can get information about draft policies being considered and share their input on any draft policy. So in closing, I want to share and remind everyone that we are in this together and we are working hard to continually keep families informed and engaged. As you can see on the slide, we are communicating as quickly and as frequently as possible when new information is available. Teachers are also in regular contact with families to maintain connections and respond to needs. They should be the first point of contact if you have a specific question about your child and their learning based on the continuous learning plan. If you have questions about the closure or input or questions about our plans, please email them to engage@apsva.us. Those questions are routed to the appropriate department. The frequently asked questions on our COVID-19 webpage is updated multiple times a week based on the incoming questions and developments. If you have a question not addressed, please contact us. We know there are many questions and we will respond as soon as we have the answer. Families are juggling, teleworking, learning at home, and none of this is easy. So we are here to help. And lastly, again, take care of yourself and your family. And please continue to practice the social distancing, frequent hand washing, and other preventive measures.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. We really appreciate the update. Colleagues, do you have any questions or comments? I'll start with Mr. Goldstein. Mr. Goldstein, you're on mute. So I'm going to move to Dr. Cannonen and then we'll come back to you. Dr. Cannonen, do you have any questions or comments for Ms. Johnson?
Sure, yes. So how many are you doing? 2, 3, 4?
We'll do 4 questions. 4 questions is good.
I have several, but I think as we rotate around. So first of all, let me just confirm, we have about 8 or 9 weeks of school left. Is that correct?
Mr. Redding, can you confirm that? I believe that is correct with the calendar.
I believe that is correct. We have 9 weeks in the 4th quarter.
9 weeks of school yet left. Yeah. That kind of reminds us that while we've done a lot of work getting ourselves to this point, there's still a lot of learning time left in the school year, and to the extent that we can continue to improve, that's that would be our goal. Can you hear me okay? I'm getting feedback. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, it's working okay, Barbara. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
There's a little bit of feedback, but we can understand you.
So I want to ask, we've several emails from families concerned about whether teachers are constrained with the ways they can work with students, online classrooms and things like that. Ms. Johnson or Ms. Loft, could you just clarify what is the guidance to our teachers, pre-K through 12 or K through 12 regarding working with students virtually?
So our teachers, so let me talk two categories. Our students in 3rd grade through 12th grade have their own assigned devices. And so that makes it a little bit easier for teachers to engage with students using online platforms like Canvas or Microsoft Teams. And so that is the expectation, and that's absolutely what's happening. Teachers, for example, may pose a short instructional video and then reach out to their students either through Canvas or Teams to engage them in conversation about that video and their learning. That would be an example. For our pre-K to 2nd graders, we had a shared device model before school closed, which means that our students were not assigned their own devices, and that was really based on neural science about the young child's brain and how it develops, and best instructional practices. So when schools closed, we worked to make the decision not to try to assign devices after the fact. I was concerned about putting devices in the hands of students and families who were not already habituated to using those devices and accessing apps and other things. So we opted to move to paper packets of instruction and resources and activities. But our teachers are still engaging with their students either via Google Phone. We use the Seesaw app at the elementary school. And they're certainly, so they're checking in with kids to see how they're doing with those instructional packets, and then differentiating students' learning as needed.
Okay, thank you. That's a very clear explanation. And I just want to dig in a little bit more with the pre-K through 2. So it sounds like you're on one level just saying, just for developmental reasons, and the school board made this decision. We went with a shared model during normal times for those grades. And you're saying developmentally, we don't necessarily want devices in the students' hands, but you also mentioned apps like Seesaw and such. So I guess I want to get a little clarity if, given where we are with the quarantine, would our pre-K through 2 students, some of them, if not all, be better off if they had that access with devices? And I'll just ask my whole question at once. And, my understanding is that, those shared devices presumably are still in the school buildings. And given that we have a number of families who are affected, might we have enough devices in our school buildings to provide them to more of those grades so that they could have a little more of that interactive experience? And so I guess it's that question of, you're saying perhaps we're not recommending it developmentally, but could we do it? And what grades could we do it? How many devices are sitting in the buildings? Given that many families are connected anyway, could we really be expanding access to grades 2, perhaps K and 1 as well?
So you're right. I mean, these are certainly unprecedented times, and we want to be able to support our students' learning in as many ways as possible. And so we have been working with our information services department to identify how many devices we have. And remember that with a shared model, we likely do not have enough for all of our pre-K through 2nd graders to have devices, but we do have enough and are working to ensure that our pre-K through 2nd grade students with disabilities and our English learner students should be able to receive devices to serve as supplementary resources to the instructional packets, and to allow ease of access via case carriers for our special education students and English learners teachers to continue to provide accommodations, modifications, scaffolding support. We expect that we should be able to have those devices available for those students at some point next week.
Okay, thank you. I have just a few areas of feedback, not necessarily questions. And I did get a chance to touch base with a number of teachers today. And again, this gets to the question of, in some cases, families who have access. Some suggestions were made, for example, that even with the packets, parents are homeschooling, basically. And there are concepts that they don't necessarily. And even I've heard that it's even difficult when parents get on Parent View to figure out how to download the packets and things like that. So the suggestion was made that we provide some, short videos for parents, just instructional types of videos. And of course, we need to translate as well. But just some little tutorials and things for parents to access, to help them with their work. I also just wanted to share a thought, which is simply, as you mentioned, the young students are best off with, tactile experiences and the opportunity to actually have new books. Normally, these students are going to libraries on a regular basis. And might there be a way, perhaps as we do food distribution, to think about book distribution as well, just as an area of feedback? And then my final comment really gets to that teacher feedback, which I heard a number of times today as I talked to some teachers. I'm guessing you have met with the TCI, Teachers Council on Instruction, sometime in this process. I really do hope that, I think that would be a fantastic group for you to engage with regularly throughout this process. Everyone, I think we have a member from every school. That gives every teacher access to someone who then has access to some FaceTime with you. And it would be a really great way to just continue to hear from teachers and, make sure that everyone is, feeling good about things. I do want to say that in my conversations today, there's a lot that is going very well, and teachers have been really quite pleased with Ms. Loft and, the hard work of everyone in the process. But I think continually hearing from them could be very valuable as we go through these last 9 weeks of the school year.
Sure.
Thank you.
And I have a couple of points just to respond to. I know you were giving me feedback, but you cued me that there were a few things that perhaps I left out of my announcement. So thank you for that. One piece that I think is really important that parents are aware is that we focus on using Canvas in our secondaries. That's our primary learning management system. So 6th through 12th graders are wholly focused on using Canvas, and many of our elementary schools are as well. And so we have posted tutorials for parents on how to use Canvas on our continuous learning page, and those tutorials are translated as well. And so that should serve as a real resource for our parents in deciphering the learning management systems. Those systems are different between iPads, which our 6th through 8th graders have, and the MacBook Airs. And so there's differentiated tutorials posted there as well. But certainly your point is taken that more tutorials moving forward as far as instruction, if you will, would be helpful. The other thing I did want to sort of reiterate with the pre-K to 2nd grade packets is that is one piece of our instructional outreach. As I mentioned, we're using videos, reading instruction videos posted to AETV that are sort of continuous. You can access them at many different intervals as another way for parents to sort of teach their children along with being guided by instructors. So that's helpful. And to speak to the TCI piece, yes, we had TCI reps sit on our stakeholder feedback groups, but you're right, we will continue to engage with them as this process continues.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Cannon. Ms. O'Grady, do you have any comments or questions on the superintendent's update?
Sure. Thanks, Chair Talento. I have several questions. I do want to ask about instruction, but first I want to ask about food. And it was mentioned earlier that the task force, thank you, Ms. Johnson, for working with the county to set up the cooperative for Hunger-Free Arlington. I'm interested in understanding if a family needs more than the regular meals that we're offering to our students, how do they actually work to be connected with this organization or with this committee?
Dr. Jeanette or Zach Pope, would you mind responding, please?
Absolutely. So one of the things that the cooperative is doing, and it's not necessarily an organization, it's a collective of organizations. What they are doing is working to make sure that all the resources are knit together. So from a school's perspective, our staff are continuing to refer folks to their school-based social worker, and the social worker is connecting them with the appropriate resources. There'll be some communication that comes out on Friday about a resource line that is available in multiple languages that county members and residents will be able to call, and that'll be published again on Friday. But as of right now, all of that information is being worked through our social workers and being connected to the right resources for the right concern that they may have.
Thank you, Mr. Pope. So if a family has a concern and needs additional services, they can reach out to the school social worker to engage further on how to receive additional help and support?
Correct. Or they can reach out to their teacher, their principal, their bilingual family liaison. Any of those folks are going to be able to refer them back and get them connected with their school social worker. It really is whoever they feel most comfortable, so we can make sure that they're connected with that resource, and making sure that those trusted connections are so important during this time where we're physically distanced from each other, not socially distanced, because we want to maintain those social connections, and that's important. So that's why we are going to continue to tell the school communities to reach out to those that they feel connected with to make that connection.
And what should we suggest to people and families who are immune compromised and cannot actually come out to our sites for fear that they may be exposed to the virus? What should we suggest they do if they need food support?
Yeah, so I would again suggest that they connect with somebody at the school base and the social worker. There are programs that are currently available for families that may have needs that have different options. There are some expanded services that are being talked about in terms of delivery models or so forth, but nothing has been identified at this point in time. But the school social workers are the ones that are on the ground working with some of the 25 safety net nonprofits that are doing the work alongside everyone else.
So we are engaged and we're sharing with this collaborative that we have families who have those concerns, and we're looking for extra support.
Absolutely. All those items are being shared on a weekly basis. As we get that information, the social workers are giving that more frequently, so we can share that, but there's a meeting that happens regularly.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your leadership on trying to help our families. Appreciate that. The other questions I have are around the education, and we have heard from some families that, from some, that they're disappointed that we're not offering new learning. Ms. Loft, you did share with us some of the rationale for not doing that. Yet, in some of our neighboring systems, they are offering some new instruction, and so families have been concerned if other nearby jurisdictions are able to offer some new learning, why is it that we have not gone in that direction? And I just want to give you or someone else on the team the opportunity to address that.
So I'll start, and then if maybe Mr. Gregory wants to join me, that would be, I think, helpful. So our fundamental decision was based on our core values in our strategic plan. And I think that our core values and our strategic plan set us apart from our neighboring districts. We have a firm commitment to equity of access. And in these uncertain times, as hard and as diligently as we continue to work to ensure that we are reaching all of our students, connectivity issues abound. We connect our families with the free Wi-Fi that many of the internet providers are offering, for example. We've worked to get MiFis to families. And there are some limitations on some of the patches that we offer. And so because we can't ensure that all of our children are going to be able to access new content, to me, it's unconscionable that we would willingly broaden the opportunity gap by introducing this new content. Now that I want to underscore a couple of things when I say that. One is we're not abandoning fourth quarter power standards. We have a plan in place to deliver those power standards in September, so that students are not going sort of without that information as much as we possibly can provide that. We are also, I look at this as an opportunity too, because the pace of normal school is such that we often don't have an opportunity to spiral back and ensure that our students have not only demonstrated proficiency, but have mastered foundational concepts that will help them as they move to the next grade level or the next content area. And so by introducing new learning opportunities to engage in analysis and application of these concepts that students learned in first through third quarter, we're really giving them a leg up so that they don't have to spend the next grade level or the next sequential course spiraling back because they didn't quite master those foundational concepts. So I hope that suffices. I'm not sure if Mr. Gregory would like to speak to that as well.
I would just add that, again, what Bridget was saying is that what we're also looking at is with our most vulnerable population, there's something that many of us call summer slide or learning loss. So what we're doing by strengthening the core and the foundational skills that they need for right now means that as we go into the fall next year, what the expectation is that that summer slide or summer learning loss can be, I wouldn't say, can be lessened by making sure that our students are foundationally strong within the core.
Thank you for that. And I just have a follow-up on that. I know that on the website it shares, and I think you said this, Ms. Loft, as well, that we're offering students the opportunity to improve from a D to a E or D to a D or E, a D or C. But you also mentioned that other students have the opportunity to enrich and extend learning through a variety of activities. I know you were getting to that in your answer. I think that some families are worried that that's just review, and that if it's just review, that will not engage my student. And I wanted to have a better understanding of what enrich and extend means, and whether or not that's something that a student does very quickly, or could that be a bigger project that would actually engage a student for a while. And I know we have time limits on what a student is supposed to spend, so they're not spending all day on projects. But is this a way for a child to have a more personalized learning experience, be able to grow in an area that maybe and explore one of these required skills in a way that they can explore something they love? So I'm just trying to figure out, so parents have a better understanding what you're getting at when you say a child can be enriched and extend their learning. Are they going to be bored because they're reviewing, or are they going to be engaged because they get to do something that they love to do? Thanks.
I'm going to have to put you on the DTL payroll. You really summed that up nicely. So I'll give a couple of examples of what an enrichment or an extended learning opportunity might be. There's a couple of ways to look at that. We can enrich and extend via process. So I'll use this as an example, and I'm a history teacher and a government teacher, so I'll use a social studies example that we might take a 360 view of the Emancipation Proclamation, right? So, and that would have been a pivotal document that students in U.S. history would have studied in the first, second, or third quarter. But they likely didn't have the time to take a look at it through the lens of Abraham Lincoln, through the lens of, a Southern landholder, through the lens of an emancipated slave, through the lens of an indentured servant. So there are a variety of perspectives that a student would take in an enrichment or an extension opportunity that they wouldn't have been able to do. And it gives them a chance to do a really deep dive, not only into the document, but the personal and the human experience of that document. So that's one way to think about how students will be engaging in enrichment and extension opportunities. Another way may be to look at different modalities of learning. So, I'll share my weakness. I'm not a particularly good visual spatial learner. So you throw a geometric shape in front of me and I'm not going to figure out how you can manipulate that. But if you ask me to write about that geometric shape, or if you ask me to manipulate that shape in a way, I'm going to be able to sort of strengthen and solidify some learning that perhaps I didn't have access to because it was presented in one way, because we're moving through the curriculum so quickly. So those might be some examples where kids really have a chance to engage with concepts and thinking that they might not have had that opportunity during, I guess I would call regular school.
Thank you. And then just the last thing I just wanted to share are some thoughts, as I know Dr. Cannon shared some thoughts. I am concerned about the inability for us to ensure that most of all of our students have access to the internet. So as we continue to go through this process, I think it's very important for us to be concentrating on how we can connect our students who are not having connections and through Wi-Fi, and look at any creative solutions we can do to do that, because I do think that that's important. We care so much, I know, about social emotional development of our children, and this is a time that's impacting students as well as adults. And so I do think that they would benefit from having some group interaction. And I don't know if we're able to resolve some of the internet experiences, whether or not group interactions in real time could be offered, even if it's just to check in. And then the last thing I'd like to have us look at is if we can fix our issues with ensuring that all of our students have access to internet. And I know that's going to be a little spotty. If we do go through our inventory of iPads, and after, as you said, Ms. Loft, we look at ensuring that our students with special needs and our English learner students have iPads. If we have enough, to look at which families do not currently have iPads. Some of our families do, if they have older children in the home, and maybe they can be shared right there within the home. And then the additional ones can go to families who would actually not have one, and look at whether or not we can support our families with any additional electronic devices, so that we can support our children, their social emotional needs, and also maybe some more opportunity to explore. So I would just ask for you guys to think about that, because that's what we're hearing from our families. And the last thing I would say is, I've heard that some students may be receiving some new learning. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but just to share with your teachers, we just want to make sure we're being consistent. We want to be consistent, and that's very important to our families, because we do believe highly in equity. And I know we have a lot of families who are very interested, and students who are interested in and teachers who are interested in connecting with their students. But I just want to make sure that we're doing it in an equitable way. So let's please try to ensure that we're being equitable across the board in that sense, and that everyone's following what the message is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Grady. Ms. Van Doren, do you have any questions or comments?
I do, and I'm wondering, for the sake of time, if maybe I ask them, And then if somebody wants to take notes and then just respond, that might be easier. Most of them are going to be in the teaching and learning area. But I'm going to start with a simple one, going back to registration, and this is for Miss Johnson. And I had the slide. It's slide number 8 from the school options and transfer. I have, sorry, I'm looking at 2 computers here. We said that online registration, we're going to have an opportunity for people to drop those off. That's on slide 10. That would be on registration for school, if I'm correct. So my question, when we were going through on slide 8, the deadlines for options and transfer, it says that all has to be done online. So my question is, and I've asked this previously, if someone cannot fill out that online, it used to be you could come into the Welcome Center and fill it out. Would it be, is there any way for somebody to do that by mailing it in as well? Because we've extended the deadline to June 1st. So that's a question I have for you, because it looks like we're taking registration packets in hard copy. Could we do that for the options and transfer deadline? So maybe there's not an answer for that, but if that could be a consideration, because I'm worried about people who cannot copy and then send things electronically.
Would you like an answer at this time?
If you have one, if it's easy.
I do believe that Bridget and Raj both can chime in because this is something that we have in fact been addressing. So I'm going to turn it over quickly to them.
Sorry about that. Raj, do you want to talk a little bit? I know you had talked about you've worked closely with the registration process and the feasibility of accepting paper forms.
So we have been working on it, Nancy. We'll follow up on that. Thank you.
I'm particularly talking about the VPI and it's the little kids, the people who are least accustomed to interacting with our system, because you've extended the deadline to June 1st. That's the one that I'm worried about, not being able to get the papers actually via the internet. Okay, so I'm going to move on from there. Thank you for listening to that. Okay, so the rest has to do with teaching and learning. So we have gotten lots of letters and feedback about practices. First of all, I think, and we've all said this 100 times, these are unprecedented times. And I think I'm looking at this as an opportunity to learn how to do this distance learning, and it's been thrust upon us, and we can just keep improving. So the feedback we get from families to me is just opportunities as we can to improve. So I'm going to say all of this in that context. So here are my comments. One is I wish we would take this opportunity to account for every single student and see which students have Wi-Fi, and make sure that every single student by the end of the 4th quarter has internet access. I think we should have that as a goal, because there is a possibility that we may not be coming back to school in the fall. I think that is a possibility. So if we can sort that out now and see exactly how many students is it that don't have access, and make sure that we get that to them somehow, I would really like to see us have that as a goal. The second piece is on what Ms. O'Grady brought up about 2nd graders. If we perhaps might do that inventory of our iPads that are out there. And after we do, as you've wonderfully done, provided the access to the EL English learners and the students with disabilities, if we have enough to at least push down into 2nd grade, in the event that we need that, if that could be thought through. So 1 is Wi-Fi access and make sure everyone has it, and 2 is 2nd grade. And then discuss with families who needs it and who doesn't need it. I think that would be useful. I know, for example, I can use Microsoft Teams on both my laptop, which I'm doing now, or I can use it on my cell phone. I'm right now doing both. I'm doing the chat on my cell phone, and I'm doing this on my laptop. So Microsoft Teams does work on cell phones. So if cost is an issue and we need to support families using cell phones to do Teams, or I have not ever used Seesaw, but maybe we could, what I'm trying to do is create a base from which we can work long term. And this as a sort of an experiment of how to get that done. So I wanted to point out those two pieces. And then another one from Ms. Loft. I have an email from Tuckahoe families. I'm the liaison to Tuckahoe, saying they really do want a good solid explanation as to why there can't be an extension of learning and what the expectations are. And their suggestion, I asked them to please look at the podcast, and they suggested that perhaps something should go in writing to all families, explaining what you explained this evening and pointing out the podcast, because some people may not do that. And that maybe that would be, if there was school talk, a useful thing to do. And then also an opportunity, as you've mentioned, to go back to engage. So that's a suggestion for you, because people don't really understand why we can't be providing new content. And maybe the difference between not covering material they've done before, but rather extensions, as you're saying, and explaining the sort of 3 levels there. So that's just some feedback for you. There's confusion still about that. And the last thing is, I don't actually think it's unconscionable to be providing new content. I think that if we are not in school in the fall, we will have to provide new content. So it's not unconscionable, and I don't think it's unreasonable for families to want new content if they find the materials they've been provided not working for their student. So I don't want to criticize families for requesting more information. I think we're learning, and I think there's an opportunity, if we can get Wi-Fi to all families and devices and consistently across the system, to, rather than be aiming at what some perceive as the lowest bar, raising that bar up once our access is there. Hence my questions about making sure that we provide access and really accounting for every student to see if we have it, getting the devices to as many as possible, and then practicing in the next 8 weeks how we deliver distance learning. Because from everything I'm hearing from my relatives in other states, that personal contact between the student and the teacher is absolutely invaluable. And I think that most of the criticism we're hearing is from the youngest students and the youngest families whose kids really need that. So I leave you with that. You can comment on it if you want, but if maybe you provide something in writing more about the why, get Wi-Fi to people, raise the bar, can think about beginning to raise the bar once we feel like we've got a handle on it, and take that as feedback, because families are really appreciative, but they want more. That's what they're saying to us without overwhelming them. Okay.
I appreciate, and I understand where I have a time deadline, so I certainly took some notes when you shared that. The only clarification point I want to make is, when I said it was unconscionable, I think it's unconscionable to knowingly broaden an opportunity gap when we don't have to do that. But that said, I completely agree that by expanding access, that we are only helping to move our students forward. And I'll take the rest of your feedback in writing. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure I have suggested to the Tuckahoe families, and this is something that is my mantra, is to first, every family reach out to the specific child's teacher. And if they need help or need support in any way, to start with the teacher. And then if for some reason that doesn't work, because I've heard that people can't get like to a special education teacher or a counselor, I've heard that people are having difficulty with that, to then go to the principal and ask for that support. And then if they don't, they can write to Engage or to someone, perhaps you, but to start with the teacher and the principal, because they're the people closest to the service and the people who know the families and the resources best. And I presume, and I'm sort of would like some reinforcement here, that that's what you want to have happen as well.
I really appreciate you emphasizing that, and I want to underscore that that hasn't changed from when we were actively engaged in person-to-person schooling. That the teacher knows the child the best, and so that's the best place to start, and then to move to the principal. So thank you so much for underscoring that.
Thank you.
Nancy, I would like to follow up briefly, and I appreciate the feedback because Raj has joined us, and I think he has some thoughts around the connectivity and some of the work that's going on with the county. Would you mind restating, I think, the 2 points that you had made earlier? This is an opportunity to share, and we can, of course, follow up as well, but I'd appreciate that.
Okay, well, regarding the connectivity, know that we were doing a big push to find out who has devices to the point of almost we know exactly who does and doesn't have them, and then hopefully who does and doesn't have connectivity, and then finding ways that we could actually connect almost as universally as possible as a base, presuming that at some point in the near future we may actually have to do distance learning for a longer period of time. So that's the question. And then can we, if we have devices out there, could we push them down and push them out if families need them so that we could go down into second grade or maybe even to first grade for those families who need them, but somehow account for who has them, who doesn't, who needs them, and use your resources to know who those people are.
All right. Good evening, everybody. This is Raj. Nancy, just to mention this, we have gone through a very detailed process of identifying every student in the building that needs access. We've collected that information, and we've actually been methodically going through that list and ensuring that every single student actually that we've listed out is being addressed. So we've actually taken care of all of that. We are still waiting for another round of batch of MiFis. And the moment we get that, we will actually have taken care of everybody that's on the list. But we are constantly seeing new students and new requests come. So we are also expanding our capacity to ensure that we are able to take care of more requests, as we say. But that's number one. The other thing we're also doing is we're working with the county very closely, because I think like the recent exercise with the libraries, at both the Central Library and also in the Columbia Pike Library, where we have actually been able to broadcast wireless access to a larger area outside the building so that people can actually take advantage of that without needing to pay for anything, but also being able to maintain social distancing and still taking advantage of connectivity, was the model that we are also expanding. We are actually trying to work with the county to ensure that this is repeated in all of the Title I schools, and we will actually expand it across the board. That is the second one. We have been blessed in Arlington to actually have the Connect Arlington framework that we've been working on for years. And this is really the strength of that. And that provides us a platform that's unique for Arlington that not a lot of people or in areas in the country actually enjoy. So we're trying to expand that and take advantage of that across the board. So that's also being done at a larger scale. With respect to devices, we've been working very closely with the Department of Teaching and Learning. We've actually had conversations with Kelly Krug to identify all the special. We are trying to do this in a structured, prioritized manner, so that first we are identifying students that really need it and making sure that they actually have access to it, and then kind of taking an inventory of our capacity and trying to make sure that we get them to the students and put them in the hands of students so that they can actually take advantage of it. So there's a kind of a combination of things that are actually happening across the board, very tightly working with the county, very tightly working with the needs of the students by integrating ourselves with the Department of Teaching and Learning, and we're actually moving forward on that. I will be forwarding a report to the board. We are actually also monitoring very closely the number of students that are actually logging on a daily basis, how many of them are actually logging, where are we seeing the gaps, trying to identify that with the ITCs so that there's some level of follow-up with those students as well, if it's a connectivity issue or the other ones. Things will be monitored. We'll continue to work through this process, and I'll share a detailed report in writing as well.
That's excellent. I think I wanted the community to hear that you are doing that work, and that to the extent you all can create a good foundation across the board at all grade levels. You're working on that so that we can ultimately at some point raise the bar in terms of what we're offering. And this is, we're at the start. And Cynthia, please correct me if I was wrong in that, but I wanted people to hear how much work is going on. Thank you.
I couldn't get to my my mute button, but absolutely, I knew that was what you wanted to have heard. So thank you very much, Nancy, for bringing that up.
Thank you, Ms. Van Doren. Mr. Goldstein, do you have any comments or questions? You're on mute, Mr. Goldstein.
Okay, how about now?
We can hear you. Great.
Can you see me?
Yes, I can see you as well.
All right, there's, two buttons here. I'm just having trouble with both of them.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I do have some questions. Thank you. I give all of these, I guess, are about the continuous learning plan. And so I guess they're all going to be for Bridget. And so first, Bridget, I want to thank you for all the hard work that you and your team put in developing this continuous learning plan. It's quite an extensive document, and I know it took a lot of time and effort on everybody's part, which of course is even more difficult now, having to, connect virtually rather than being able to sit in the same meeting room and, have access to all those materials like, we would normally do. So thank you for that. I'm concerned about the students who don't have devices. And I think Nancy touched on some of this, don't have devices or don't have internet access. And they may not have devices for a variety of reasons. They've been lost, stolen, they're broken, and they were waiting for, repair or replacement when we decided to cancel classes. So I'd like a little bit more information on that. How are they being accommodated?
So I'll give some brief information, but then if Raj wants to kind of supplement with what IS is doing, that would be helpful. So for students who fall in the camp that their devices were lost or broken beforehand, I expect that I know that information services staff has been working directly with those families to get devices into their hands. And then for students whose iPads break during this time period, our ITCs have been in direct contact with students and with staff members who become aware of this. And so we've got sort of a triage system in place to address those as well. But I'll cede my time to Raj if he'd like to speak further about that.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Bridget. Mr. Goldstein, I think I wanted to let you know, our IS staff is actually working on SciFax on Tuesdays and Thursdays, where we actually have office hours between Tuesday morning and Thursday morning. Basically, when we are working on these devices, and if there is an identified person that needs to come and pick it up to continue working within the social distance guidelines, we are reaching out to tell a particular family to come over and actually exchange or work with us. So we are continuing that process as well. The other thing that we also have done is, during this process, knowing that there'll be a lot of support that is needed, we've created an email for each particular school to reach out in case there is a technical problem with the device or with the system that we have actually identified as the platforms for instruction. And that is published on our websites. It's also being part of the School Talk messages, and it's on the distance learning website as well. So there is a unique email for each school that is being monitored actively by the instructional technology coordinators in the buildings, and they're engaging IT in the back end depending upon this particular issue. So we are not, to be honest with you, I don't think we are actually at 100% capacity that we would actually be able to operate if the offices were open and we are able to turn things around as fast as we want. but we are trying to prioritize the requests that are coming depending upon the situation of the student. There are certain places where there was a student in a high school that needed it because of the particular work that they were doing. We had to prioritize that student. So it's kind of a combination of things that we're actually trying to do while balancing the safety and security, the health of the staff, students, and community. We're trying to balance that out.
Okay, thank you. So let me just ask a follow-up about that unique email address at every school. Now, there are some schools where there's, a good size number of parents who aren't using email or don't have email for a variety of reasons, but use, other mostly phone-based apps like WhatsApp or something like that. So is there a way to get that information out to those who are not, on email, not using email?
So Raj, I'll jump in, and then if you've got some other things to share, but I did want to share, we've had a great deal of success using the robocall feature. And I know that that was employed to address some of the food distribution opportunities. We also, our bilingual family resource assistants who are assigned to most of our schools have been engaging with families via phone. And I know that Information Services is working on getting them APS issued cell phones so that they can capitalize on WhatsApp and some of the other sort of phone-based communication systems that many of our L families use as well.
Okay, all right, very good, thank you. Let me move on to my next question. Now, I know there was some talk a little while back about, I'm referring now to those students, the section in the continuous learning plan about grading, and those students who are deemed not making sufficient progress, or I forgot what the term is, in good standing or something because of their grades. And that if they're not able to raise those grades or, become in good standing because of the grades, there was some talk about access to summer school. Now, I know we don't know what's going to happen. No, we don't know what the summer is going to look like. Do you have any thoughts about that? I don't think I saw summer school or heard about it in the presentation.
I have to say, I was grinning a bit because you kind of served that up to me. You're right, but there are a lot of unknowns about summer school, chief among them as to whether we'd be able to have access to buildings in July. We've started some preliminary planning on the assumption really that we may not have access to buildings in July, that we may be looking towards August. And I think we've got a few factors that are starting to shape our understanding of what summer school might look like. One would be if we're planning for August, that's limited time. We essentially have 3 weeks that we could be working with there, as opposed to our 5-week model. The second is we are in a significant budget deficit, and I don't want to sort of rain on Cynthia's parade, but she'll share with you where we are. And so we've got some budget constraints, and so we're going to have to be really strategic in how we target our most needy students. And so I'll use as an example, certainly our students with IEPs who might be eligible for extended school year services. We're certainly considering how do we deliver those services in a shortened period of time. Our L students, our English learners, who Aaron talked about the summer slide, we certainly want to have some opportunities for them to continue to build their language proficiency. Our high school students, our secondary students who have Ds and Es, who don't have consistent internet access and so could not engage in those performance assessment tasks to move that grade needle to demonstrate proficiency. So I would say in sum, the factors are when can we have summer school? When can we access it? What's sort of the funding forecast? And then the last piece is to ensure that we have enough staff available to help deliver the services for our students. So I expect that we'll have a plan in place by early May, and I'm certain that I'll be talking further with you.
Okay, great. I'm looking forward to it. I know it's good to know that you're thinking about it, and we're working towards something given all of the unknowns. So my next question is, I'm concerned about what you said or someone said about the paper packets for the pre-K through second graders that are available at the food distribution sites. But well, first, what happens if they're not being picked up? What happens for whatever reason? Either the student or the family are just not going to food distribution sites, or they're in line too far back and turned away when we run out of food, or whatever. But even those who are going to food distribution sites and picking packets up, are they in the language? Is the instructional language consistent with the home language? In other words, are they going to be able to read it? Are the parents going to be able to read it? And then I'm worried about the ability for parents to be able to help with that, those assignments or instruction, because as has been pointed out many times, pretty much, all of our families are in, kind of homeschooling mode. So can you talk about that a little bit?
So as far as the quantity of packets, we made more than we'd need. And the good news is, at least since Tuesday or Monday, when the packets were available, they are being picked up at a pretty good clip. We have plans in place for our pre-K to second grade teachers to identify the students that they've either not been able to get in touch with, or that they're aware have not been able to pick up a packet, and we'll be mailing those packets home. So we'll, by Friday, have a pretty good sense of which students we need to put those packets in the mail for them. As far as support via language, the directions for the packets are translated into the 4 languages that the DOJ settlement agreement requires. And our teachers, as I said, are more than once weekly, regularly checking in with their students, and they can use the language line to help with translation. So as they're working with the student, they're also working with the parent in the parent's home language to help them understand how to continue to support their children.
All right, very good. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you, hitting all those bases. And so my last topic is the issue of the decision to not provide new content. And I'm hoping that you're going to continue to think about this. I've got issues with kind of the philosophical consistency here, that if we're broadening the opportunity gap by teaching new content, are we broadening the opportunity gap by teaching new content under normal conditions, in classrooms and, prior to the pandemic? Let me ask the question, how would that no new content decision how could it have been made the other way? In other words, to decide to teach new content, would it have to be if we had 100%, one-to-one devices implemented and everyone had reliable, internet? Because it seems to me, if that were the case, then we're making the perfect the enemy of the good. So I think we're in a situation where we're requiring movement at the pace that access allows, access by virtue of internet, or access by virtue of having a working device. But it seems like that is the determining factor for whether the new content is taught to everyone. So, like I said, I think that's my last topic. So if you could expound on that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, absolutely. So I want to approach that from a few different avenues. I'm going to come back to our strategic plan, which guides how we move forward. And a fundamental factor of our plan is equity of access and equity of opportunity. So when we think about sort of normal face-to-face school, we have an opportunity gap that exists, and we work very diligently to address that in a variety of ways, spiraling the curriculum, using formative assessment to determine where we need to intervene with kids, differentiating the curricula. And so we do continue to do that. But I think the benefit of having a child in front of you with whom you can interact and use all of those interpersonal dynamics to really suss out both a relationship with the child and to have a true understanding of how they're gaining sort of knowledge and proficiency isn't there. It's much harder and distancing, literally and figuratively, to have to do that via distance learning. So when you ask, aren't we, by introducing new content when school was happening before March 13th, were we broadening the gap? I think there is some evidence. Yes, we had a gap, but we had the interpersonal tools to be able to work towards closing that. The concern now is our kids don't have access to everybody having a device or the consistent internet access. I think the other thing I'd want to throw out that I'm not sure everybody sort of has landed on, when we take the scope of essential concepts that are presented through a school year, in fourth quarter, there are fewer of them that are presented. And that's due in large part because there is a significant amount of time taken during the fourth quarter on assessments, IB, AP, SOL assessments, final exams, closing out the school year. And so another factor in that decision to not address fourth quarter concepts was the recognition that the volume was not as robust as if we had to close schools in the second quarter. So in order to be able to address those in September, we've got less of a heavy lift, if you will, than we might have in the earlier quarters. So, and in response to your other, the perfect would be that everybody would have the devices and the internet access. I see that Tanya has arrived on the screen, so I'm going to mute my mic.
Thank you.
Mr. Goldstein, were you done with your questions?
Let me just take a quick look here. Yeah, I have. Yeah, I appreciate the, like I said before, all the work and thought that's gone into this, and especially the fact that we were able to pivot so quickly, as a result of, strong leadership skills, classroom skills, the commitment, from the teaching and the central office staff. So I do appreciate this. I know we are in unprecedented circumstances here. So thank you again.
Thank you. So many of my colleagues had asked and provided comments that I also had questions about and concerns. I did want to provide another perspective on the equity piece. I understand the desire for new content and the frustration that some parents may get, but I think that there's a lot of validity in, I validate, validate's not the right word. I appreciate the concern because I think one of the things that we often forget are environmental factors that come along with poverty, that come along with a lot of the situations. Many of our low-income families right now are having some of the hardest experiences. They may be the ones that cannot work from home. They may be the ones that are in the process of trying to figure out how to not get evicted. They may be the ones that are struggling the most with food. And even if we were to get everyone internet access and a device, it doesn't mean that they would have access in an environment to get that education. You may have a parent who is suffering from depression. You may have a parent who's a recovering alcoholic, and this leads them back to that disease. And all of a sudden you're asking a child to log on. In the meantime, they're stable, their home life isn't stable. They may be required to care for their siblings. And when they went to school, because most families, no matter how unstable or sick they may be with mental health or whatever the other issues may be, pride education and will send their children to school. And when they go to school, they're in an environment for 8 hours where they can focus, where they can be normal, where they don't have to think about the stresses and the trauma that they're experiencing at home, and they get the ability to learn. And so now that has been taken away from them. And even if we provide them these devices, it doesn't mean that they will have the mindset or the environment to access it in a way where there still will not be a gap created. Now, if we go into the fall and this becomes a long-term situation, we will have no choice but to go and educate our students to the best of our ability online with new content. Create a plan. I would ask as a board member, create a plan where every counselor is touching every student, where we know which students are having those environmental factors providing detriment to their education, where we have created a mental health plan, a trauma-informed plan, and at least that way we have a triage for those students that will need additional supports because they don't have an environment to access online learning. But when we're looking at 8 weeks of learning where we can strengthen, and we're putting in a plan to provide extended learning last year and do a review of the first quarter or something, that's just another perspective I want to share, that a lot of times just having the tools, the access, while I do think it should be a goal and we should strive for that, there are other factors that come into play when you talk about the achievement gap and the poverty gap, and all the other barriers that are in place for many of our gap groups. So I just want to provide that perspective. And then I don't have a question, but I did want to provide feedback when you were talking about creating videos for our students and so forth in a lot of the earlier discussions, that maybe there's an opportunity to use the cable channels where we stream our meetings. Maybe we could have a set schedule where 2 hours a day is dedicated to a certain class level, and you're not creating new material, you're just playing the materials that have already been shared with the students who have access to Canvas or so forth. Maybe it's a weekly video that we can do for our pre-K through 1, and they can watch TV. I remember when my kids were young, and I was working and getting everyone ready for work, I would put the PBS channel and they would watch those shows in the morning, like Arthur and Caillou and things like that, because I felt like at least there was something that they were getting while I had to get them ready for everything. So it's just some feedback. It's another public resource that can be used, that is a public channel, so you don't necessarily need cable to access it, I believe. I may be mistaken on that, but just some feedback for you. So those are all the questions and comments that I have, and thank you so much for the presentation, Ms. Johnson, and all of our ELT who participated today. So if there's nothing else, I'm going to move on to the next part of our agenda. Okay. So we are now at our consent agenda. I move that the board adopt the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second from Nancy Van Doren.
Thank you. And the clerk will call the roll.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposing say nay. Mr. Goldstein?
Aye.
Dr. Cannonen?
Aye.
Ms. O'Grady?
Aye.
Ms. Talento?
Aye.
Ms. Van Doren?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We now have one information item tonight. The interim superintendent's revised proposed 2021 budget. Ms. Johnson?
Yes, good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. This is the superintendent's revised budget based on changing circumstances. If I could make sure we have the presentation up. I'm going to go ahead. I've had some challenges with my device and being able to see the presentation. So I'm going to guide Dwayne and just move forward with the interim superintendent's proposed budget. So first, I want to thank the budget staff for the quick turnaround and the thoughtfulness of the ELT principals and staff in working to present a new proposed budget that honors our commitment to students and preserves our highly qualified team during these extraordinary times. I also want to thank the school board for its support to provide a new budget direction and guidance as we drafted a new budget with timeline constraints. Additionally, I want to thank our partners in Arlington County for the continued dialogue and flexibility as we have worked towards developing a new budget that maintains the integrity of our system while retaining our team that we have worked so hard to recruit and attract to APS. In the last month, our community and our country has endured a new lifestyle, new workspace and technology, and in our division, the introduction of distant learning model. We were expected to implement changes on a daily basis because the situation is fluid. I am particularly proud of the adjustments and creativity of our APS team to make it all work as we continue supporting our community. In developing this budget, I reflected on the start of the school year where I visited every school and shared a presentation that ended with an image that said, "We are all in this together." Little did I know at that time that this would be the trending phrase today. It has been one of my pillars this year and has provided me with the strength to lead this division during this challenging time. As you will see, decisions were made with an equity mindset, and this budget provides opportunity for all staff to contribute to closing the deficit in a variety of ways. I was glad to know that I had spread this message early on, as we will all need to pull together to make this budget work. When I presented my original budget, I outlined the continued commitment that we have to students, staff, and the community, and that commitment still stands. Our goal is clear: continue delivering instructional and educational excellence, addressing the social and emotional well-being of our students, and maintaining our high-quality staff that drives our organization. Over the past weeks, I have tapped into the thinking and expertise of my team to deliberate and consider efficiencies and identify realignments to creatively address our significant budget needs. What has changed since I presented my original proposed budget just 7 weeks ago is that the world looks different. Our schools and buildings are closed. Our staff is supporting the system remotely, and our budget pressures have increased immensely. We continue to be very fortunate to live in a community that is committed to meeting the educational needs of our students in partnership with the county, and yet we are all impacted by the pandemic. However, as we all know, the economy has been hit hard, including our local economy, resulting in significant reductions in tax revenues for our county. The ripple effect of COVID-19, the economic shock being felt everywhere, and the full impact of COVID-19 is yet unknown and has led to the need to now present a new budget proposal. The pandemic has changed our budget direction, but has not changed our needs. We continue to be a growing school system. We still need to remain competitive, and in recent years, we have lost our competitive edge when compared to our neighboring jurisdictions. We want to retain highly qualified staff. We still have the increased needs stemming from special education program evaluation and English learner evaluation and DOJ settlement agreement mandates. And we need to maintain our commitment to infrastructure. We also understood that it was imperative to find opportunities to realign our service deliveries in areas where this was feasible while maintaining the excellent instructional program that we deliver for our students to grow and thrive academically. This budget includes this approach to assist with our budget deficit in addition to the use of reserves. In order to close this new gap, we have made tough decisions that will impact everyone. We are hopeful that the budget outlook over the coming weeks will shift in our favor, and today's budget presentation is our best thinking based on the information we have at this time. This budget continues to align our work with the APS strategic plan and with the mission to ensure all students learn and thrive in a safe, healthy, and supportive learning environment. And it highlights our commitment to our core values of excellence, equity, inclusivity, integrity, collaboration, innovation, and stewardship. We will continue to monitor this health crisis over the coming weeks and rely on our continued partnership with the school board, staff, and the county to adopt a budget that is balanced while maintaining our quality instructional program and operational excellence. Next slide. We really worked hard to honor the commitments that were presented in the original proposed budget, including our commitment to students, starts with closing the opportunity gap. We are also committed to providing the students with what they need to become college and career ready, inclusive environments that are safe and welcoming with the right mix of course options. Our commitment to staff is illustrated in this budget, where we maintain salaries in fiscal year 20 for all scales through this health crisis and preserved our team to continue delivery of our world-class instructional program. Our commitment to the community. We want everyone in Arlington to be proud of our school system and see value added to the county as a result. We also want to ensure that we are thoughtful and prudent with our fiscal resources and that our schools continue to be safe and welcoming places for all. Next. In developing the fiscal year 2021 budget, we faced a number of pressures from outside the school division. Next. When I presented my original proposed budget, we were dealing with a number of external budget factors. Many of these factors still remain, but our biggest challenge now is the economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic. This has led to a loss of tax revenue to the county from restaurants, stores, and hotels, among others. Next. School closure as a result of the coronavirus has affected our fiscal year 20 budget. While we have had some savings from operations for those things that are not taking place, we have incurred some additional expenses as well and will lose revenue from fees that no longer are collected. What we don't know at this time is how seriously the economic impact will affect state revenues, but we must prepare for a decline in those revenues as well. In order to ensure that we are in a position to weather the loss of revenue we anticipate, I have directed staff to find efficiencies and to spend only on those items that are absolutely necessary for the remainder of the year. I have also placed the hiring freeze on all non-essential positions until June 30th. And now I'd like to review some of the highlights of the budget. Our needs-based budget for fiscal year 21 totals $725.9 million. The revenue shown here is based on the county manager's proposed budget, at $698.4 million. In the original needs-based budget proposal, there was a request for an additional $27.5 million in revenue from the county to meet the outlined needs in the fiscal 21 budget. The revised needs-based budget for fiscal year 21 totals $725.9 million. The revenue shown here is based on the county manager's proposed budget of $672.8 million. We are hopeful that the stimulus package and the decisions made by the state will allow for significant allocation for APS. We do not know the state allocation at this time, and the situation is fluid. While this additional funding for education has been provided from federal COVID-19 stimulus package government to the state, it is too early to know if APS will benefit. This graph provides an overview of our enrollment from 2000 to 2029. And since 2007, our enrollment has increased by 50%. Over the next 10 years, enrollment growth will level off somewhat, growing an additional 10% over the next 10 years. The consequences of this extraordinary growth is that we have a plethora of needs, not just in the classroom in the schools, but also in our support departments. As our square footage has increased, so have our maintenance needs. APS has 20% more square footage to maintain than it did a decade ago, and our buildings are 10 years older. The number of staff in APS has increased 30% since fiscal year 2010. This results in increased demands on staff in our central departments, such as teaching and learning, who provide professional learning, curriculum, coaching, and other services for staff, or human resources, who provide payroll, benefits, licensure, and other services to employees. Increased enrollment has resulted in the need for increased capacity, which has led to an increase in the number of procurements for construction-related services, as well as day-to-day purchasing needs. Next, I'd like to review the steps we took to reduce our deficit for fiscal year 21. There were 4 guiding principles that were used. What efficiencies were identified? What efficiency can we identify? What can we stop doing? Non-core services. What can we do differently or in a new and innovative way? And what are additional factors that we want to acknowledge? So we acknowledge that the additional factors were related to equity, stakeholder voice, policy, and protecting our infrastructure. Next, my original proposed budget included a compensation increase, funding for our enrollment growth and transportation, and needed resources for our English learner students and our students with special needs. At that time, we had a deficit of $27.5 million. In starting the process to revise my budget, we first took a look at considerations related to spring enrollment updates, which typically take place in March. This update resulted in a savings of $800,000 and 2.3 positions. The next step was to eliminate all of the additions we had made to the budget. All of the new requests in Tier 3, Tier 2, and Tier 1, the realignment of resources that were in conjunction with those tier requests, the compensation increase, and textbooks. Once we had eliminated all the additions, we needed to determine which of those additions were still either mandated or severely needed for the fiscal 21 budget. As you can see here, we added back some resources for English learners, special needs students, transportation, and other needs. We took out the increase in school counselors as the state recently decided to delay implementation of that initiative, and we added a $5 million contingency to offset any further revenue losses of which we are not aware of at this time. We expect the state will be revising its budget for fiscal year 21, and that will likely result in a loss of revenues to APS. In addition, the projected county revenue could change. We want to be prepared in either eventuality. With these changes, our next expenditure amount is $701.8 million. On the reverse side, we have reduced our projected revenue for fiscal year 21 based on the county manager's revised proposed budget. We also have revised down our estimate of Medicaid revenue because of the school closure due to the coronavirus. We also had to reduce the reserve being used in fiscal 21 budget to correspond with the expenditure reductions outlined in the past few slides. This resulted in revised revenue of $660.6 million. With this new revised expenditure and revenue amount, our deficit has increased from $27.5 million to $41.2 million. I am presenting 3 scenarios for the board's consideration. Scenario 1 includes a step increase per policy. Scenario 2 includes a 1% COLA. And scenario 3 includes no compensation increase. The resulting deficit for each scenario are shown. As we move forward through this presentation, you will note that the only scenario, scenario 3, results in a balanced budget. In order to close the deficit, we had to make reductions to our budget. The next 3 slides outline the reductions by strategic plan goal. So under strategic plan goal 1, student success, we eliminate the FLES program, but add back some flexible positions to help principals provide required planning time. This realignment was included in my original proposed budget. We increased class by 1 at all grade levels. We are reducing exemplary project staffing by half, except at Title I schools. And we are reducing the contracts of ITCs from 12 months to 11 months. Reductions under Strategic Plan Goal 3, Engaged Workforce, include eliminating tuition reimbursement for 1 year and eliminating funding for compensation and budget studies. We are also recommending 1-day furlough for all staff. We did this so that we could preserve as many positions as possible to preserve our team and maintain our infrastructure, much like the county manager did in his revised proposed budget. As I mentioned in my opening comments, we are in this together, and while a furlough is not ideal, it allows us all to contribute to addressing the gap and avoid elimination of positions which will have a long-term effect. We are recommending that the furlough day be a professional development day and that it be scheduled late in the school year, as late in the school year as possible. In doing this, as we move through fiscal year 21 and see how the economy rebounds, we are able to reassess the need for the furlough. We are hopeful that we will not need to implement the reduction next year. Strategic Plan Goal 4, Operational Excellence, has the largest reduction. These include using VPI carryover funds for VPI expenditures, reducing debt service as a result of the county delaying the bond sale until the fall, reducing our MC/MM budget for 1 year, and reducing ongoing baseline increases by almost half. We are also eliminating some one-time purchases, which allows us to put the reserves we were using to offset those costs back into reserve fund. In addition, we are implementing a number of department reductions that include hiring delays for a number of positions rather than outright elimination of those positions. Next. With these reductions, our new revised expenditure total is $671.1 million. We also made some additional changes in revenue. We reduced the amount of reserves being used as a result of eliminating some one-time costs. And we used a significant amount of reserves to balance the budget. As you see, under the 3 scenarios presented, only scenario 3 with no compensation increase results in a balanced budget. Next slide. Here we are providing an overall look at our reserve funds. We are using a significant amount of reserve funds to balance the budget, but we believe this is the best option for APS in order to preserve our team, maintain our high quality staff, and continue our tradition of excellence. We do need to bear in mind that our reserves must be replenished in order to be able to use them in future budgets to help mitigate cost increase and one-time costs related to increasing our capacity. This is becoming harder as our closeout funds continue to decrease. Because this situation is so fluid and continues to change on a daily basis, I want to reiterate that this revised proposed budget is based on the best information we have available as of today, April the 16th. I know this will change, and when it does, we will respond accordingly. The next slide shows the growth in enrollment and the cost per pupil since fiscal year 2009. Our cost per pupil decreases 0.2%, primarily because of reductions needed to close the new deficit, partially offset by increased funding needed for English learners and students with special needs. Enrollment is projected to increase 1,122 students, or 4%. So to wrap up, and in looking ahead, we still have a number of consideration and budget pressures that we need to keep in mind. Added to those are a number of new considerations resulted from the new revised proposed budget, restoring class size, competitive compensation, restoring funding for positions not hired for the fiscal year 21, and replenishing our reserves. So I would like to leave you with a few key takeaways this evening. First, this is an extremely unusual year that has brought increased budget pressures. As a result, we have had to make some very tough decisions. We have implemented $54 million in reductions and realignment of resources in an effort to close our gap. We have preserved as much as possible our quality programs and services. And we are beginning now to prepare for future budgets. And so I'll end by sharing that our next slide shows our revised budget calendar. And you'll see that over the next 3 weeks, we will have 2 budget work sessions and 2 public hearings prior to the school board voting on its adopted budget on May the 7th. I would again like to extend my thank you to everyone for their dedication to APS throughout this time, and to the principals and ELT for their work on this revised proposed budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for the presentation. I want to share with the community that we have a budget work session on Tuesday, April 21st, in which we will be able to ask take a deeper dive into the superintendent's newly and revised proposed budget. And we will also then start a discussion on the school board's proposed budget. Tonight, I'm going to ask my colleagues if they have any clarifying questions. We do have 2x2s on this with Cynthia and our finance department tomorrow, and then again the budget work session on Tuesday. That will be televised as this is to have a deeper discussion. So if there are any clarifying questions, I'd like to open the table to that. I will start with Ms. Van Doren. Do you have any clarifying questions for Ms. Johnson?
I do. The one thing I want to understand is this is a PowerPoint that gives an overview. Is there a budget document that is accessible online that has the detail about some of the reductions? I'm looking for detail, and I'm wondering, is that available, or will that be available? Because I haven't seen that.
Yes, there is a detailed document, especially pertaining to the tiers, and that'll be part of the information that'll be shared with school board for the work sessions that will be coming up.
So it's not available tonight? I'm sorry.
No, let me have Leslie add on, because I believe it is available. Leslie?
Good evening. We are not preparing a budget document per se. We will have some documents that will provide some more detail for you. But at this point, the budget document that you're used to receiving is not going to be available. These decisions were just made yesterday. We've had absolutely no opportunity to put together that kind of a document, but we will begin to put out the more detailed documents over the course of the next several days. Again, we've been working night and day on getting the budget bottom line and on this presentation, so we don't have all of those documents ready to go at this moment.
Thank you. I will need that detail, and I know I'm supposed to have it 2x2 tomorrow, and I'm just going to need that detail, and we only have a week. So I know you're working flat out. I should have started by saying this is an excellent presentation. It is very clear. Thank you very, very much. And Ms. Johnson, your words at the beginning in particular were superb to explain the situation. And I would request that whatever you were reading from become a written document that's shared with our community, because it's not reflected in the PowerPoint, and the words were an excellent setup and explanation of where we are. So if you could do that in whatever outgoing communication goes with this PowerPoint, it would be fabulous. But I again request, I'm going to need to see that detail in this budget. Thank you.
So we will include those, the opening comments, and we will provide the details on the tiers that we do have in time for your 2x2s.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Ms. O'Grady, do you have any clarifying questions?
I do. I know we only have a week to really respond with a school board budget. I'm wondering if we have questions that we'd like to have detailed answers to, or maybe just general answers to. Is there a good way for us to request that information?
I do know that we were talking, Leslie and I were discussing maintaining the protocol and procedures we've had in the past, but I would appreciate Leslie reviewing those for us. I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Of course, we still have the budget questions process, and we will be working fast and furious on getting answers to those for you. We will have the work session next week at which all ELT members will be present, so you will have the opportunity to ask questions of ELT at that point. As to other questions that you might need answers to more rapidly, we're just going to do the best that we can during this process with the normal budget question process.
Thank you very much. And then the last question I have is, I know I'm the school board liaison to the Budget Advisory Council, and I know that they are receiving this information like we are through this presentation, and didn't know whether or not they could respond.
Ms. O'Grady, what do you mean by didn't know if they could respond? We are passing a resolution tonight that will allow our advisory committees to meet on matters that we are able to address virtually that are time sensitive, like the budget, and emergency matter, consequences of emergency, like the distance learning and so forth. And I will have a meeting with the advisory chairs to share with them some of that and how they could do that. So can you provide a little bit more clarity on the question and respond? We will, and just to maybe jump in with an answer, we are going to allow our chairs to provide comments at the public hearing on Tuesday prior to opening it up to the general public. So they'll have that venue, of course, the emails. I think in the past they've done recommendation letters for us. So I just wanted to get clarity on your question, unless that answered it.
That did answer it. Thank you very much, Chair Talento.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any other clarifying questions?
I do not. Thank you.
Dr. Cannon, do you have any clarifying questions?
Yes, thank you very much. And I agree. Thank you for doing the very, very, very hard work. This is not what we want to be seeing, but it's where we are. And I know, Ms. Talento, you just want to do clarifying questions. I think I have three. First, does this budget, you know, in the original proposed budget, we had to increase the number of counselors due to the new state guidance or the change made at the state level. Have we removed those additional counselors in this revision, since they're not required at this point?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
That you can see on slide, excuse me while I go through this real quick. Slide 19.
Okay, thank you. Yep, there they are. School counselors ratio changed. Yep. The vacancies, I think maybe it was in Ms. Johnson's announcements earlier, talked about leaving vacancies open for now, since we're in an emergency situation. Do we leave those vacancies open into the next year's budget, or does this budget assume we're filling those positions?
The hiring freeze right now is only until June 30. You will see when you get the detail that there are a number of positions that we're recommending that we not hire next year. We'll keep the position itself, the FTE, in the budget, but we won't be hiring for those particular positions in order to save the funds for those positions. But the hiring freeze is just between now and June 30th at this point.
And what you just said is or isn't reflected then in what we saw tonight?
The positions that we're going to delay hiring, yes, those are reflected in the detail, in the reductions that you've seen tonight.
Okay. And then one last question. The furlough, it's 1 day. So I assume that what that means is staff work somewhere about what, 100, how many days do they work? It's basically like their salary is basically going to be reduced by about 0.5%. That's really the.
Every person will have to forego 1 day worth of pay, correct?
And that would happen in that particular month. There's going to be a day that's called the furlough day, or does their salary just basically get prorated for the whole year?
I believe that trying to prorate that over the course of the year would be extremely difficult, because then we would have to go in and touch the records of every single employee in the school district to adjust their salary. So it would be a day during a particular pay period, which is why we're recommending that furlough day take place much later in the year, as late as possible, so that we might have the opportunity to say in January or February or March, we don't need to take this furlough day. We're in a much better position than we thought we were going to be a year ago, and therefore that is taken off the table.
If we feel we have the funds, we could actually take that out.
Economy
Got it.
Rebounded.
Okay. I look forward to our work session on Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cannon and Ms. Peterson. Mr. Goldstein, do you have any clarifying questions?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. On slide 10, I'm confused about this number, this asterisk. Where is slide 10? That's not it. Yeah, slide 10. Okay, the asterisk at the bottom. Based on proposed county transfer of 2.2 million. I don't understand how we can only be getting a county transfer of 2.2 million. Our revenue sharing agreement says 47% and of the locally generated tax revenues, and the locally generated tax revenues are greater than almost $5 million. So that's what 2.2 would be, 47% of, something under $5 million. Can you explain that?
I think I can, because I'm not quite sure I know what your question is. On slide 10, we show what the total revenue is, 672.8 million, of which the large majority is from the county. We were expecting an increase in county transfer of 23.8 million in ongoing funds and 3.7 million in one-time funds. We are no longer receiving the one-time funds, and our 23.8 million has been reduced by 21.6 million, leaving an increase of $2.2 million in county transfer for next year. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I'm going to have to.
That's the 2.2 million is just the increase from the FY20 amount of county transfer to the FY21 amount of county transfer. It's not the total county transfer, it's just the amount that the county transfer is increasing. But in the original proposed budget, the county transfer was increasing $23.8 million. That has been reduced by $21.6 million based on the revenue sharing. The county is losing about $65 million, I believe, and our share of that is, or $45 million, and our share of that is $21.6 million.
And there's no one-time funds included in this new revised
No,
revenue?
there are no one-time funds available.
Okay, I've got a few other questions, but I'll save them for my my budget 2x2, which is coming up quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. Thank you, Ms. Peterson. I have two clarifying questions. The first one is, I'm glad that Barbara asked about the furlough. I was curious, the furlough is a day without pay, but I thought I heard Ms. Johnson suggest a professional development day. So can you provide clarity on that? Are we saying that we would ask them to do a professional development day on the furlough day in which they're not getting paid for?
No, what we talked about was looking at the calendar and trying to pick a day that would be least impactful to direct instruction.
Oh, so I see.
One of the days that we were looking at doing was the professional development day and taking that off the calendar rather than a day of instruction.
I understand. That makes a lot more sense than the way I was interpreting that discussion. So thank you. So just to clarify for myself, we would use a scheduled professional development day as a furlough day and eliminate that professional development day for the.
That's the recommendation, correct?
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. And then that was to happen as late in the year as possible on the hopes that maybe we would not have to take it because projections would be better. Funding projections would actually come up better.
I believe the county did had the same strategy one year when we were going through the recession previously. They put a furlough day into the budget, and later in the year they realized realized that they didn't have to do it because things had come back. And so they were able to take that off the table.
Excellent. So the other clarifying question I have is on slide 29. It's the reserve slide, and I'm confused as to what we're using for this budget. It's a slide that has about 5 columns. The first column shows what we were using in the original proposed budget, and then the next column shows what we were. There's another column that shows what we're actually putting back because we're not adding those additions.
Right.
And then the final column shows what we're using, but I don't know how we got to, are we using $14 million of the reserves? Because it looked like the math was 5, and so I'm confused. I don't know if Dwayne can bring that slide up. It's slide 29.
We are using $14 million in reserves in addition to some other reserves, like we are using $1.1 million for VRS still. We're still using $270,000 to offset debt service, and we're still using some amount, I can't remember what it is, for offsetting one-time costs in our budget. So around 2 million, I believe.
Okay, so
what we did, and maybe it's not the clearest, it seemed clear to me at the time, but you know how it is. So we had the balance of our reserves in the first column, and then what we used in the superintendent's original proposed budget in the second column. So we used a total of about $18.2 million in the superintendent's original proposed budget. We added back about $15.8 million from all of the reductions that we made. So you can do the math. That's about what, $2.4 million that we're using in the budget still. And then on top of that, we're using an additional $14 million just to close the gap, not for a particular purpose specific to items in the budget, but $14 million off the top to plug a hole.
That makes sense. Okay, so we are using the $14 million, but because it's not from a specific reserve, it doesn't come up in the breakdown on this table.
Right. I didn't want there to be a lot of conversation about which reserve it was coming from. They're really one big bucket of reserves, even though we've kind of parsed them out a little bit. Capital is a little different than the rest of them, but it could come from any or all. We could do a proportion. We could take it all from one and the rest from another.
But at the end of the day, it's all reserve money used for this type of situation.
Correct, exactly.
Okay, thank you. That was very helpful. I understand that now, and it's very helpful to know that we're using a total of $14 million of reserves in this revised proposed budget that was presented this evening.
Yes.
And then the last clarifying question I had is, in what was presented tonight, we saw the slides with the reductions. Are those all the reductions, or is there more detail within each of those slots that we need to know and be prepared to share with the community and so forth? Or are these pretty clear and transparent?
For the most part, on the reductions, they are single items on each line item. So okay. Slide 23, for example, each of those line items is a reduction. Okay, there's really no detail. Well, there's really no detail behind them. Perhaps knowing exactly which schools with the exemplary project staffing is going to be reduced from. On slide 24, it's really a singular reduction. The only place where we do have some more detail behind the reductions is on slide 25 on the last line where it says department reductions. We have some further detail behind those. Okay. But as for the reductions that you see, they're mainly one-off reductions that are listed separately, and there's not really any detail behind those.
Okay, and those department reductions we'll discuss further at the budget work session.
We'll provide the detail.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't have any other clarifying questions. I just want to echo my colleagues' comments. It was an excellent presentation, and I just want to acknowledge and recognize how hard you and Ms. Johnson worked over the last couple of weeks to make this happen. might be a week because we have spring break in between. So things are changing very quickly. I know that you all have been working 24/7 literally, and I just want to thank you for being ready this evening with this budget. And we look forward to discussions tomorrow in our 2x2s and the budget work session. And colleagues, are there any last clarifying questions? Okay. All right, thank you. So I'm now going to, and thank you again, Ms. Johnson, for the presentation. We now are going to take up 2 items for information and action. After each item is presented for information, if there are no concerns, the board will take action on the item. And I just want to share quickly that we're hoping once the General Assembly's meeting, as I think Ms. Van Dorn mentioned in opening comments, meeting next week, and we're hopeful that we'll have a little bit more flexibility on what we can address in a virtual meeting. But until then, we will probably do info and action items just because of the constantly evolving pandemic. It just ensures that because all of the items that we'll be hearing have a timeline factor to it, it ensures that we're not getting delayed on those. So we apologize for that change in our practice. It is temporary, and as soon as we feel confident that there won't be further delays and we have flexibility in our meetings, when we meet virtually, we will resume to our prior practice of having info one meeting and action the other. So we're going to start first with the consideration of a resolution on electronic meetings. I think, as was shared earlier, again, we are limited to what we can do in our virtual meetings. It really is things that you need to address as a consequence of the pandemic, like distance learning, food distribution, and so forth, and things that would cause harm to the system, like the budget, CIP, contract, personnel items. So we worked with our legal counsel over the last few weeks to develop a resolution. We wanted to formalize it because it's such a significant and serious situation that we find ourselves in, and unprecedented, that we really believe, while our board does not generally do resolutions, we believe that this situation called for one. So we worked with our legal counsel. There are many other regional boards that are doing something of this sort to formalize and share with the community how they will be practicing virtually. This resolution is current as of today. If the General Assembly provides more flexibility, then we may amend it or add on to it to allow for the ability to address more, but we try to be very clear. It is a 6-page resolution, so I apologize for that, but I do want to read it all because it really details the work that we've had to do, what has really happened in the course of this pandemic, the different orders that have taken place, the different guidance that we're receiving, the different decisions that have happened, and then it'll end on how we will move forward. This is posted on board docs. So normally the chair doesn't do the motions, but because this is our first virtual meeting, I'll be doing the motions this evening for ease of facilitation. And colleagues, I just wanted to find out if you had any questions after that brief description, and I'll provide another opportunity for any questions after I read the whole resolution. Do you have any clarifying questions? Okay. So I move that the board adopt the following proposed resolution to implement emergency practices and procedures for the continuity of the Arlington School Board's operation for the duration of the COVID-19 pandemic as presented. Whereas on January 31st, 2020, the United States Health and Human Services Secretary declared a public emergency for the entire United States to aid the healthcare community in responding to the novel coronavirus COVID-19. And whereas on March 11, 2020, the World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 outbreak a pandemic. And whereas on March 12, 2020, the Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia in Executive Order Number 51 declared a state of emergency and disaster within the Commonwealth of Virginia, pursuant to Virginia Code Section 44-146.16, arising from the public health care threat presented by a communicable disease anticipated to spread, and directed localities to limit large public events effective immediately. And whereas on March 13, 2020, the President of the United States found and declared the outbreak of COVID-19 to constitute a national emergency retroactively beginning on March 1st, 2020. And whereas on March 13, 2020, Cynthia Johnson, interim superintendent of Arlington Public Schools, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, announced the closure of the school division at least through April 14, 2020. And whereas on March 13, 2020, in accordance with Virginia Code Section 44-146.21, the Arlington County Manager signed a declaration of local emergency, which was ratified and consented to by the Arlington County Board on March 14, 2020. And whereas effective March 23, 2020, the Governor of Virginia, by Executive Order Number 53, in furtherance of Executive Order Number 51, and to mitigate the impacts of COVID-19 and its spread, ordered the closure of all K-12 public and private schools in Virginia for the balance of the school year. And whereas on March 30, 2020, the Governor of Virginia, by Executive Order Number 55, issued a temporary stay-at-home order due to novel coronavirus COVID-19, ordering all individuals in Virginia to remain at their place of residence and accept as provided in that order in Executive Order Number 53 through June 10, 2020. And whereas there have been multiple confirmed cases of COVID-19 among Arlington County residents. And whereas Arlington County Board found that COVID-19 constitutes a real and substantial threat to public health and safety and constitutes a disaster as defined by Virginia Code Section 44-146.16, being a communicable disease of public health threat. And whereas Virginia Code Section 15.2-1413 provides that, notwithstanding any contrary provision of law, a locality may, by ordinance, provide a method to assure continuity of government in the event of a disaster for a period not to exceed 6 months. And whereas government operations include the work of Arlington County Board and other local public bodies and the personnel who work for or on behalf of local public bodies. And whereas the Arlington County Board on March 24, 2020, adopted its emergency ordinance to modify public meeting and public hearing practices and procedures to address continuity of operations associated with the pandemic disaster, authorizing it and public bodies that perform governmental functions in the county to use electronic means for its meetings so that they may meet virtually as permitted by the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, which is Virginia Code Section 2.2-3708A3, to consider matters and take actions essential to ensure the continued operations of the government in the county, provided a quorum is in attendance virtually, and provided such meetings shall be duly noticed in compliance with the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and provided the public will be offered the opportunity to attend the meetings virtually. And whereas nothing in the Arlington County Board's March 24, 2020 ordinance prohibits it or other public bodies from convening in public meetings, provided that public health and safety measures, including appropriate physical distancing, are utilized. And whereas the Arlington School Board values transparency in its operations and public engagement, it also finds that emergency measures are necessary to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 and to protect the health, safety, and welfare of students and employees while still providing for its operations to continue during this state of emergency. And whereas the Arlington School Board affirms the foregoing determinations of the existence of a disaster and the declaration of a state of emergency throughout the entire county affecting the students, staff, facilities, and members of the school community of APS, and the school board being a public body included within the scope of the county's emergency ordinance, the school board adopts the procedures for the conduct of public meetings as set forth in the emergency ordinance and as further set forth herein. And whereas Article 8, Section 7 of the Constitution of Virginia and Virginia Code Section 22.1-28 vests the supervision of the public schools of the school division and school board, as the Attorney General of Virginia opined on March 4, 2015, confers expansive power on school boards, finding that the Supreme Court of Virginia has made clear that the Constitution's grant of express supervisory power necessarily includes a broad range of implied powers. And whereas, given the severe limitations on the physical gathering of people during the COVID-19 pandemic, which gathering is ordinarily required for many tasks of the school board operations, as well as to fulfill the necessary obligations of the school board to its constituents, to include students and their families, the school board finds it appropriate to provide, by resolution, a method of transacting necessary public business during the disaster without the physical attendance or gathering of people during the duration of the COVID-19 disaster, to provide for its ongoing and continuing operation, and to address the emergency and its essential and legally prescribed functions and responsibilities, which, if not timely addressed, will result in substantial harm to the students, staff, operations, facilities, and community members of APS. And whereas those critical and essential functions and legally required procedures which must be addressed by the school board to ensure continuity in government include, but are not limited to, the procurement of goods and services necessary to continue functioning, adoption or amendment of policies and regulations to address changes in instruction, staffing, facility usage, transportation, provision of meals, calendar modifications, delivery of distance learning and instruction, and modifications to existing technology, personnel searches, discussions, or determinations to include the search process for APS's superintendent, compliance with due process protections and procedures for students and other disciplinary matters for students and staff, provision and staffing of health services, adoption of the budget and any necessary amendments, payment payment of warrants, acquisition of public and real property, construction of facilities and related contract obligations, investigation and resolution of discrimination and other complaints involving employees and students, compliance with obligations arising under federal statutes, other legal compliance and litigation, adoption or amendment of policies and regulations that are due or overdue for review, or that are necessary to ensure alignment with the Virginia Code, and other essential matters critical to the operations of the school division, which are anticipated in the immediate future and thereafter during the pendency of the COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, it is hereby resolved that the following emergency measures are adopted by the Arlington School Board. Section 1, purpose, effective date, expiration. The Arlington School Board, in compliance with all federal and state directives, may participate in meetings necessary for the continuity of government solely by electronic communication means without a physically assembled quorum in one location, while otherwise remaining in compliance with the public notice, public access, and other requirements of Virginia of v. FOIA to the extent practicable. This emergency resolution is effective immediately upon its adoption by the Arlington School Board and shall remain in effect through the longer of the emergency resolution of the Arlington County or June 10th, 2020. The school board reserves the right to subsequently adopt a resolution or motion to rescind, amend, or extend this action. Public meetings and public comment. Public meetings. Any regularly scheduled or regular meeting of the school board may be held by solely electronic or telephonic means without a quorum of members physically present and without members of the public physically present, provided the following occurs. The item or items discussed are necessary to address the disaster or to assure continuity of government, including time-sensitive matters set forth in the recital above, and as to which, as referenced in the recitals above, the usual procedures cannot be implemented safely or practically. The meeting is accessible to the public through live audio or video on the school board's website, a dial-in telephone number, and/or a social media platform. The public notice for the meeting must include a statement that the meeting is being held using electronic means, contain specific information about how members of the public can access the meetings, and if there are any public hearing or public comment items, specifically identify how members of the public can provide comment, including one or more of the following: by email, in writing, by telephone, through your social media platform, or via other electronic means. The agenda and other materials associated with the meeting will be posted in compliance with FOIA. Any votes taken during the meeting must be taken by roll call, individually recording each member's name and vote. The minutes of any meeting under this resolution must conform to the requirements of law, including identifying the forms of electronic communication used, the members participating and the means by which they participated, the opportunities for public access or participation, a summary of the public comments, if any, and the actions taken at the meeting. Public comment, the board may, for any or all meetings and/or agenda items to be considered at those meetings, elect to dispense with the requirement for live public comment where such comment is not legally required. The board will, however, provide alternative means of providing public comment, including on agenda items as follows. Normal rules of order apply with respect to requiring the name and home address of the commenter. The comments relate to the hearing or comment topic, that appropriate limits on the number of comments per person per item apply, and the comments be of reasonable length. The submission of public comments via phone call, email, recorded video, or in writing up until a reasonable time before the start of the meeting, so long as those comments are provided to the school board members prior to any decision on an item. If available, members of the public may provide comments through leaving a voicemail on a dedicated phone number up until a reasonable time before the start of the meeting, so long as those comments are then provided to school board members prior to any decision on an item. If available, members of the public may provide comments through telephonic or interactive electronic means, like call-in meeting access or social media platform during the meeting, so long as those comments are received by or provided to the school board members prior to any decision on an item. The school board may choose to receive additional comments through any means for a period of time after the public hearing or public meeting, so long as it announces and publicizes that opportunity and those comments are provided to the school board members prior to any decision on an item. All public comments must be made a part of the record of the school board, either by being summarized in or included with the meeting minutes. For matters as to which a public hearing is legally required, members of the public will be offered the opportunity to attend the meeting virtually and to participate in the meeting virtually, including the opportunity for offering public comment without physically attending the meeting. The board may also make arrangements for members of the public to participate at a physical location, with some or all members of the board participating electronically. Closed proceedings. The school board may hold closed meetings or sessions electronically, provided the meeting topic falls under the closed meeting requirements and provided other applicable FOIA requirements are met. The closed portion of such meetings will be held separately from the portions of the meeting publicly available via electronic means referenced above. Necessary meetings of school board advisory committee shall be conducted consistent with the above provisions for meetings of the school board insofar as applicable, and that is under the advisory committee section. Finally, the temporary suspension, waiver of inconsistent school board policies and PIPs. Any policies or policy implementation procedures of the Arlington School Board or Arlington Public Schools are suspended, waived to the extent they are inconsistent with this resolution. This resolution shall take effect immediately upon its adoption by the Arlington School Board. Colleagues, may I get a second?
Monique O'Grady seconds.
Thank you. Are there any questions or discussion for the resolution, colleagues? Ms. Elliott, as our clerk, would you kindly do the roll call?
Yes, ma'am. All in favor, again, please say aye, and those opposed say nay. Mr. Goldstein?
Aye.
Dr. Cannonen?
Aye.
Ms. O'Grady?
Aye.
Ms. Talento?
Aye.
Ms. Van Doren?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Our final agenda item tonight is a proposed amendment to Sun Tribe Solar Comprehensive Agreement. Ms. Johnson, would you please introduce our staff for the item?
Yes, my pleasure. I'd like to introduce John Chadwick for this presentation.
Good evening, everybody. It's nice to see you. I see the presentation up here on my other screen. This is an amendment to the Sun Tribe Solar's Comprehensive Agreement, which you approved in December of 2018. If we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Oh, it's gone back. The comprehensive agreement was awarded to Sun Tribe Solar in December 2018 for the provision of solar photovoltaic PV rooftop systems at 5 locations. That was Fleet Elementary, which has now been installed, Jefferson Middle School, Kenmore Middle School, Tuckahoe Elementary, which has also been installed, and Washington Liberty High. The original agreement and the amendment that we are presenting to you this evening were the subject of a huge amount of work by a number of people that I really must acknowledge. First of all, David Webb, our Director of Procurement, who put endless hours into something which was new to all of us. Also, Kathy Lynn, our Energy Manager and Stormwater Administration, who also put a great deal of time and effort into it. And I should not forget to mention our counsel, Robert Richardson, who has worked with us all the way through this. I think, as you know, this is a very important thing to me personally, and I very much support our role at Arlington Public Schools of promoting and having solar energy in our school division. If you could go back to the slide, please. Can we get the slide up again, please? Thank you. The 3 remaining solar PV rooftop systems are planned for installation in later this year and next year, pending roof restoration projects at Jefferson Middle School, Kenmore Middle School, and of course, Washington Liberty High School. Next slide, please. If I could get the next slide, please. Thank you. As part of the amendment, we are adding 4 sites, Abingdon Elementary School, McKinley, Wakefield, and the new elementary school at the Reed site, which is designed to be zero energy. The revised language regarding the contractor's insurance It also specifies the self-insurance obligations of the contractor. Next slide, please. So these are what the amendments are. And as I explained at the beginning, this is really quite complicated. We are removing Tuckahoe Elementary School from the comprehensive agreement because the State Corporation Commission's SCC rules on solar PV rooftop systems a minimum array size. So in other words, it is too small to receive the tax benefit that the other schools will provide that is received by the Sun Tribe Solar. So the solar rooftop system has already been installed and is operational at Tuckahoe. It is saving us around $5,500 a year and providing about 6% of the power required by that school. Sun Tribe Solar will actually continue to provide operation and maintenance support for this solar PV rooftop system at no cost to APS under a separate agreement, comprehensive agreement, and we will not actually pay for the power that is generated by those panels. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the recommendation is that the school board approve change order number 1 to Sun Tribe Solar's comprehensive agreement with the following items. We would add the solar PV rooftop systems at 4 sites, the 4 I mentioned before, Abingdon, McKinley, Wakefield, and Reed. That the language be revised regarding the contractor's insurance, which specifies self-insurance obligations, and that Tuckahoe Elementary be removed from that comprehensive agreement. We also are recommending authorization of the school board chair to sign leases for new sites, the 4 new sites, terminate the existing lease, and sign a new lease for Tuckahoe. Next, please. The next steps are, after you've authorized this, that the school board chair would sign the following items: new leases for the 4 additional sites, termination of the current lease for Tuckahoe, and a new lease for Tuckahoe. And then on the next slide, there are some actions that, if you go to the next slide, there are some actions that you are authorizing the Director of Procurement to take. And that would be to approve change order number 1 to the comprehensive agreement, to sign the new comprehensive agreement for Tuckahoe, and to sign the Tuckahoe assignment and assumption agreement as well. And that is the recommendation and the next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chadwick. Colleagues, do you have any questions for Mr. Chadwick? I will start with Ms. Van Doren.
Thank you, Ms. Talento. I'm somewhat confused about the Tuckahoe piece, but I'm going to leave that aside for right now. My larger question is, what are the cost ramifications of this change in this contract? It seemed to me that in some of the adding of the solar arrays on roofs, we had to do work that we did not expect to the rooftops. is there a cost to APS to do anything to our rooftops to allow for these installations?
Yes, there are some costs to the rooftops to do the installations. They are costs that were planned already, and they extend the lives of the roof. And in the case of the Jefferson Gym, they replace the roof.
What are the costs?
I don't have them at my fingertips. I will get back to you. The two of the roofing projects are underway, and the Jefferson one we're getting bids for shortly.
So, Ms. Talento, I just want you to know I'm going to have difficulty moving on this during these economic times without understanding the cost ramifications.
Thank you, Ms. Van Doren. Do you have any other questions for Mr. Chadwick?
I don't understand what's happening with Tuckahoe, the in and the out, and I don't know if it's possibly going to be clearer. If everybody else understood it, I'll let it go, because right now I need more information about money, and that's more important to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. O'Grady, do you have any questions for Mr. Chadwick?
I do have one question. Mr. Chadwick, you said that some of the roofing changes are already underway and they have therefore already been approved for payment?
Correct.
And so of these items that are here, how many have not been moved forward that will require new payment?
The Jefferson roof is out to bid at the moment, and the bids are expected, I believe it's tomorrow.
And would there be a way to move forward on the ones that are already being paid for, and then come back on the Jefferson one once we have more information? Or is it imperative that they all go together because this is a comprehensive agreement?
I will have to refer to council for the answer to that question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Grady. Dr. Kennedy, do you have any questions?
I guess now that I feel like now we only have half the information. So this is to approve a contract amendment with SunTribe, and then separate from that, we might have expenses in order for the installation to happen. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Chadwick?
I'm saying yes. I am saying that there are expenses at Jefferson, and there have been expenses for work that's going underway to put new coatings on two of the roofs. That is Washington Liberty and Kenmore. We do not believe any additional roof work has to be done at the 4 sites that we are adding. Of course, one of them is a new roof, so there's no question that it would be done additional cost at Reed, I'm sorry.
But those are projects that we already approved. We approved those roofing projects. This is about.
Yes, the only one you have not yet approved is the Jefferson roof, which will come to you shortly.
But again, that's not the subject of this contract change.
It is not.
Okay, so to be clear, there may be costs associated with Jefferson, but we already approved that part of the contract.
You haven't approved Jefferson yet. You haven't approved the Jefferson roof replacement yet because we haven't brought it to you yet.
Not the roof replacement, but the contract with SunTribe.
Yes.
This contract is about Abingdon, McKinley, Wakefield, and the new elementary school at Reed.
And it's an amendment.
As well as the Tuckahoe change.
Yes, and it's there are some amendments relating to insurance on the other roofs.
And which of those 4 schools do you think we will have roof projects for?
The new 4 new schools, we don't anticipate any. And as I just said, Reed rather is a brand new roof.
Right. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cannon and Mr. Goldstein.
There we go. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So I guess I got two questions. John, do you have costs for the effect of this, you know, in a backup slide or something like that we can see?
So you mean of the effect of having the solar power?
No, of what has to happen. What the cost would be to do what you've got on the slides, to make the changes in the roof at Jefferson, and did you say Kenmore also?
Yes, Kenmore and Washington Liberty. Those projects are already underway.
The other ones are underway. Jefferson is not, right? It's still out for bid.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And none of the 4 new sites, Abingdon, McKinley, Wakefield, or the new school at the Reed site, are going to require any roof work by APS?
That is correct.
And is there costs related to the Tuckahoe wrinkle here?
No, we're getting a deal. We're not paying anything for the power that is being generated on that roof.
No, I meant any construction costs.
No, that's completed and installed and actually operational.
Well, we're removing it from the deal with Sun Tribe.
You're removing it from the overall deal with Sun Tribe because we're not actually going to be, it is too small for them to receive a tax break on. And we are not going to be paying for the power from it. So it's a different agreement than the main agreement where we are actually going to be paying them for the power.
Okay. Are we anticipating additional school sites, agreements with Sun Tribe on other school sites besides the 9 that are listed here?
Not at this time.
Okay. And why? Because they're too small? They wouldn't satisfy the SCC's requirements?
Quite frankly, the amount of effort that it's taken us to do this has been considerable. We've learned a great deal out of the process, and we will certainly consider doing future roofs as we move forward.
Okay, and is there a requirement, Tanya, is there a requirement that we vote on this tonight? Or John, is this time sensitive that has to be voted on tonight?
We would like to do that because we will be able to start receiving power at Fleet, and we'll be able to turn that on.
That's ready to turn on?
Yes.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. Mr. Chadwick, I have some questions. When we turn the when you talk about turning the power on at Fleet, is that a savings to us? Can you describe that a little bit more?
Yes, I can't give you the exact amount, but the amount that we pay the Sun Tribe Solar for the power that's generated by the building, by the photovoltaic array on the roof, is lower than the amount we pay Dominion for the power from the utility grid.
I think there's a concern that we have that is, considering the current unstable budget environment that the state and the county and ourselves are in, there's concern about entering into a contract and then finding that because we entered into that contract, now have to spend additional money on items, and these items questionably are not essential. And so I think that's a concern. Can you provide clarity on that? And if it is, you know, as one board member, why I know I've heard that concern, but as one board member, I would have concern signing a contract now, knowing that it's going to cost us, you know, even $10,000 or $15,000 to make that happen. And so I know that in the past, that would, can you just provide us, are we looking at additional costs at any point in this coming fiscal year based on entering this contract?
The additional cost that we are facing is for the replacement of the roof at Jefferson. That roof is, I think, over 20 years old. It's due for replacement anyway, and this is a good time to do it.
Where would this money come from?
I will defer to Ms. Peterson on where that comes from, if she wouldn't mind answering that question.
I apologize. I was here, but I was not completely paying attention. What is the question?
The question is the funding for the new roof at Jefferson over the gymnasium is funded through the MCMM bond, I believe.
Yes, in the CIP we have bond funding for major infrastructure projects like roofing and windows. So the Thomas Jefferson roof is being funded with those MCMM bonded funds that were in the prior CIP.
And that funding cannot be used for anything in our operational budget?
That's correct.
Okay. And so, John, the only out of these schools listed in this contract amendment, the only one that will have a cost tied to it is the TJ Middle School, whose roof is 20 years old, and we have already money budgeted to replace that roof for this project that is coming from bonded funds that cannot be used for our operational budget. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Chadwick, I'm not sure, I know we're going to move forward with action on this. If it does not pass tonight, we'll find out what information the board needs, and we can then see if we can bring it back to the meeting next Thursday.
Ms. Talento, can I ask another question?
Yes.
Okay, so the money is set aside from bond funds. That bond money was used to fund multiple bonded projects like fleet. We will be considering items related to fleet. What I'm saying is we have bond reserves for bonded projects. I'm quite concerned about spending money at this point. So I'm not convinced that we're not being liable for additional funds. So I'm going to leave it at that. But Ms. Peterson, you said this money is coming out of bond money in the MCMM, correct?
Yes, it's part of the CIP that was approved 2 years ago. Part of the projects, if you will, that were listed in the CIP were major infrastructure projects that would replace roofs or replace windows or do electrical upgrades at the schools. And all of those were funded with bonds, just as fleet was funded with bonds. We sold bonds for that particular purpose, roofing, windows.
But once money is placed and passed in bonds, that money can be moved to any capital project, can it not?
If the school board so desires, yes, you can move it from infrastructure projects.
Thank you. So, Ms. Talento, I need more money on financing in order to approve this. So I'm just going to be voting no in the event that we're asked to vote this evening.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Van Doren. Colleagues, are there any other questions before we move to the motion?
I have a
Sorry, go ahead.
Dr. Cannonen?
No, I didn't. That was Monique.
Oh, I apologize. Ms. O'Grady?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chadwick, I'm trying to have a better understanding. The consolidation of all of these roof projects, does that give us a better return from the sale of the electricity back? So in other words, the more square footage we put together, does that give us a better return on the project?
No, the rates are not really affected by that. We do make a saving overall because we're paying less for the power than we pay for it from Dominion. And the rate is fixed for a very long period of time, whereas the Dominion rates, as we know, are subject to escalation.
And I'm not sure if you're the correct person to answer this, but as we're looking at money going out, we're also looking at our revenues coming in. And I wanted to know if this was going to have a sizable impact on our revenue if we were to move forward with this without Jefferson.
We will have to calculate those numbers for you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Goldstein?
Yeah, thank you. So is it possible that we could just put this off and vote on it in 2 weeks, since it doesn't sound like there's overarching urgency that it be done tonight, so that we can get the information? I mean, I'd rather not vote against it because I don't have sufficient information, but, spend the time to get the information and then, review it at the next meeting when we can schedule it as an action item. That would be my preference.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. Dr. Cannonen?
Yeah, I do have a comment. So first of all, Fleet opened in the fall of 2019. We have not yet activated the solar power at Fleet. Is that correct, Mr. Chadwick? Because of this a contract issue with SunTribe?
Yes.
So we've had the solar in place at Fleet. We have been unable to utilize it, get whatever cost savings for this year, because until this contract is signed for that particular issue.
It should not be turned on until the contracts are signed.
Right. I feel like we're mixing things up here. Is anything in this contract that we would be voting on tonight or in 2 weeks, does anything that we would be voting on have to do with the Jefferson solar apparatus?
It doesn't have to do with the apparatus, but we cannot put it on the roof until the roof has been replaced.
But that's not what's in this. That has nothing to do with this contract.
It's not to do with this contract, exactly.
Okay. Let me say that again, because I think people are getting confused with different projects. This contract has a change, because in the Tuckahoe thing, it's got McKinley, Abingdon, Wakefield, and one other school. The action we would take tonight. I'm sorry?
School at Reed.
And the new school at Reed, right. The action we're being asked to take has nothing to do with the Jefferson project or the Jefferson roof.
No, it does have something to do with that. It is changing the contract terms. It's an amendment to the contract under which SunTribe Solar will supply power through the photovoltaic arrays on those 5 roofs. And Jefferson is included in that.
Okay.
John, I have one more question. If we approve the contract tonight in the amendments, which would allow Fleet to go on and start saving us some money, and we move forward with the other schools which do not need roof replacements and hold on Jefferson, will that have assuming that the board wants to hold on that, because that's what I'm hearing, that they don't want to, or there's concern about spending the money on replacing the roof at Jefferson, will that have a detrimental impact if we approve that contract tonight? Could we approve that contract and hold off on the Jefferson piece maybe for a year until we're in better budgetary situation, fiscal situation?
So there are legal ramifications of that, which I am not qualified to opine on, and we will have to get that answer. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, so why don't I just want to share with everyone, our next board meeting is a week from today, and then after that it's May 7th. So because we're meeting virtually and it's already a little different, I wouldn't want to bring anything to any of our work sessions. So we either can bring this back in a week or on May 7th. So I think, John, we're going to keep this for information. And if we could get some of the answers to the questions, do you need us to submit those in writing for you?
I think we have the questions.
Okay, that would be great. And then we can bring this back and act on it and pass the contract, hopefully.
Yeah, I would like to just add that Jefferson needs a new roof over the gym. It is 20 years old.
Yeah, and I just want to get, since we're having this discussion, we have money in MCMM based on bond sales that we sold specifically for roof replacements to maintain our older buildings, Jefferson being one of them. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And that will come separately, whether we do this contract or not, that roof replacement order request.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful. No. Okay. Colleagues, any other questions before we move on to new business?
I just want to be clear, this is Nancy, that I want to know two questions. What are the potential additional costs for signing this that come along with signing the contract related to any kind of improvements that APS has to do in order to, we would be obligated to do if we found them? What do we have? I want to know if we've assessed the roofs and are we absolutely positive there are zero costs related? And I also want to know when we entered into the agreement originally, we were not told about the costs, and what have the costs been that we have now had to enter into in order to have these roofs go on? That's what I want to know. Those are I just want to be very clear about those questions. So I'm talking about cost and liability. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. So just for clarity of the agenda and process, we had scheduled a motion to act on this item this evening, and we will not be. We will be tabling that motion and bringing it back to a future board meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chadwick, for the presentation. Thank you, colleagues, for the questions.
Can I say something before?
Yes.
Before we finish? Okay, I just want to take a quick minute and thank John while he's here for completing the work on the light tubes at Randolph. That was a project that was that community looked forward to for quite a long time. I think it was 1993 that the renovation was done. That created the extra wing, which unfortunately then created a whole set of classrooms without windows. And the light tubes are, of course, not windows, but they're a way to bring natural light in. And finally, it was completed, I guess, just very recently. And saw a nice picture of the classrooms with the light tubes in it. I certainly hope we can populate those classrooms pretty soon with students. So thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chadwick. I appreciate the time and the presentation. We're now going to move to new business. And it is with a very heavy heart and great sadness that I share with you that the board has been made aware this evening that Eric Gutschall has passed away. So I ask that we take a moment of silence to honor him and his memory. And for those of you who prayed for a colleague and former county board member, former Vice Chair Eric Gutschall. Our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to his family. I believe my colleagues may have some comments. I don't think I'll have any additional comments this evening. Mr. Goldstein, do you have any comments?
Well, this news took us all by surprise this evening, and we're all extremely saddened to hear of Eric's passing. We all enjoyed a great relationship with him as one of our county board colleagues. And I know personally, I truly, truly enjoyed my interactions with Eric, my, separate meetings I would have with him, our monthly coffees, and the loss is just devastating. And I, like everyone else, send my condolences to his family, and just going to have to take some time to grieve. Thank you for the opportunity to make a comment here.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. Ms. Van Doren.
Mr. Goldstein said that beautifully. I just want to add that I have this wonderful memory of Eric in our Arlington Committee for Transportation Choices meetings, just passionately talking about public transit and his dedication to it. And he brought such passion to it for himself and his kids, and talked about his kids' use of his daughter would either walk or take the bus to go to the Queer Center and other locations. And that passion was amazing. And I've been reflecting on that since we got this message, and it's a real loss for our community. And it's so difficult that during this crisis that we can't be more personal in our extending of our sorrow to his family. And it's just a tremendous loss, but I have a wonderful smile when I think about his activity in our committee and how passionate he was. So I like to remember that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Dr. Cannonen, do you have any comments you would like to make?
Sure. I mean, this is shocking. He was not only a tremendous colleague, but a very good friend, and I will miss him terribly. We'll be thinking, my husband, family, and I will be thinking of Renee and the beautiful girls, and this entire community is grieving.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. Ms. O'Grady? Monique, would you like to make some comments?
I'm sorry. I just wanted to send my condolences to Renee and the girls before Eric became an elected member of the county board. I knew him as a parent at an elementary school, and I've watched his family, his girls grow up, and I'm so sad right now. And he has given so much to this community, but I know his family is missing him as just a wonderful father as well. So that's what I'm thinking about tonight. I want to just send my thoughts and prayers over to Renee and the girls. And I'm so sad that we're in these times where we can't express in person the sadness and the support that I'd like to be able to express. But we're all thinking about them tonight, and I want to thank his family for their sacrifice, as he gave us so much of his life before he passed away. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Grady. Renee and the girls, I just want to share that I'm sorry for your loss. And may God give you strength during this very difficult time. And just know, Eric, that you will be sorely missed. You'll be sorely missed. Board members, is there any new business? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.